Chapter 268. A dark blue suit matched with a round-face shirt. Tall, but slightly indifferent. She also had short hair that made her look very capable. Luacio's eyes stayed on the other person's face for a while. There was no doubt that this was a very delicate face, and there was no doubt that this was a girl in a neutral dress, about 27 or 28 years old. Quite handsome. Street magician? Luocio asked curiously as he looked at the handsome woman who appeared out of nowhere. He subconsciously looked around as well. He didn't want to become a passerby in someone else's street photography and then become the target of ridicule on VK or even YouTube. Don't worry, there's no one filming. The handsome woman smiled. Really handsome, Luocio nodded in his mind. But the handsome woman's eyes never left Yi, who was sitting next to him. Hidden within her charming gaze was a yearning for beauty and pursuit. Perhaps there was also a hint of eagerness. "Are you two lovers?" she suddenly asked. Luocio said indifferently, "We will always be with each other." Wow! The handsome woman's eyes suddenly lit up as if she was praising him. Then she opened her hands in front of Luocio, and Yi, empty hands. She even flipped open the cuffs of her shirt to show that there were no hidden items. As a magician, her eyes should be very attractive. At this time, Luocio admired the other party's eyes. They were green like jade. At this time, the handsome woman picked up the napkin on the table. Her left hand clenched into a fist, and then she used her right hand to slowly put the napkin into her left fist. She began to blink her charming green eyes, and then put her left hand in front of Yi. She chuckled and said, "Can you give me a breath?" With Luocio's permission, Yi gently blew out a breath. The handsome magician took back her fist and kissed it. Then she stretched out her hand again and slowly opened her fingers in front of Luocio and Yi. There was a blue, sea-like flower blooming in her palm. This was a bright flower with no jagged edges and split, like a feather. Cornflower. The servant girl smiled, but she knew the flower's name. At this time, the handsome female magician smiled very gentlemanly. "Only its blue can set off Mrs. Deep Blue Eyes. I give it to you, my lady." Yi reached out and picked up the cornflower from her palm. When she just grabbed its petals, she suddenly looked at Luocio and said, "Can I perform a magic trick?" "Do you know how to do it?" Luocio was surprised. Yi directly grasped the cornflower in her palm and imitated the street magician at the beginning. She clenched her small hand into a fist and at the same time stretched out her other hand into a fist and made a simple crossing movement. Then it stopped in midair. The servant girl looked at the handsome female magician and said, "Guess which hand is it in?" The female magician was stunned. Although she acted casually as a magician, her eyes were never really casual. His observational skills were like an instinct, seeping into every line of sight in his daily life. But at this moment, she had no way to determine which fist the cornflower was in. She didn't see any exchange movement of the beautiful girl. All the exchange movements couldn't be hidden from her. But if it was still in the original fist, it was not a magic trick. Perhaps it was just a simple psychological game. Don't you want to guess? Yi asked softly. The handsome female magician smacked her lips, showing a confident smile. She stretched out her finger and pointed at Yi's small fist that originally grasped the cornflower. "Are you sure? If I guess wrong, I'll pay for you too," she said calmly. When the servant girl's fingers were opened like flowers blooming on the selected fist, she couldn't help opening her mouth slightly until the empty palm was completely opened. She suddenly whistled, without the annoyance of failure, but looked at the other fist of Yi, and this fist was also opened at this time. There was also nothing. "Well, I think I've met a master." The handsome woman generously admitted her failure. "As promised, I'll pay for it. Then I won't bother you two." Seeing the back of the handsome woman walking to the counter to pay the bill, Boss Luo laughed. "Don't you think it's a pity to destroy this cornflower with black flame? The servant girl once again verified Boss Luo's previous evaluation. She could always give a happy answer. Besides the master's gift, is there anything else to cherish? She tilted her head, making the string of diamond earrings under her earlobe shake slightly. It seemed that she hadn't taken it off since the day she put it on. Luocchio's fingers tapped on the table gently, imitating the magician's gesture. His fingers curled into a fist and then opened. Another bright cornflower appeared. Where are we going next? When Vera walked out after paying the bill, she couldn't see the man and woman at the table. She walked to the table, suddenly squatting down, looking under the table, but found nothing. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. Then she sat down and carefully recalled the scene just now. How did he manage to fool her eyes? Dear Miss Vera, what are you laughing at? At this moment, a man about 32 years old appeared beside Vera, holding a big paper bag of food and supplies. If I tell you that I met someone who cheated my eyes, would you believe it? Vera rested her head on her head, casually leaning back with the chair. The man opened his mouth in surprise, then shook his head dully. No. Vera shook her head. I don't believe it either. Well, stop joking. The man suddenly sat down, seriously saying, Have you watched VK? What's the matter? Vera asked casually. Well, F&C just uploaded a video on VK, admitting that they stole the painting, The Nameless Maiden, from the gallery. Vera took out a pack of kiss from her clothes. Vicar, did I go to the gallery last night? Vicar said, Did you sleepwalk? Chapter 269. In a mess, he fled in panic in the streets and alleys because two men in suits and leather shoes were chasing after him. His face was filled with urgency, but his speed was inversely proportional to it. He had no choice but to support his right leg to adjust the direction he was walking in. As for his right thigh, there was a piece of grayish-white cloth wrapped around it. Of course, it was already bleeding profusely, like red ink melting in water, bright red and dark red. The blood that flowed out at different times actually turned into a clear pattern on the cloth. He couldn't walk fast, so he had to use the complicated city streets to get rid of the pursuers. Gradually, he thought, perhaps even I have lost my way. Sorry. He seemed to have bumped into someone, but he didn't have time to take a closer look. After a quick glance, he hurriedly walked into another alley. He didn't know that after he bumped into someone, something fell out of his clothes, a tube of paint. Luocchio didn't need to do anything. When his eyes fell on the thing on the ground, the maid had already picked it up and brought it to him. Before Luocchio had time to look carefully, two men in suits walked out of the alley. Well, they were very close-fitting, straight suits. At first glance, they probably looked like elites. Seeing that there were only two people here, one of them saw the tube of paint in Boss Luo's hand and directly asked in English, Did you see a man pass by? His leg is injured, so it should be easy to recognize him. Oriental face. The man directly switched to the language that was most likely to be able to communicate. Boss Luo immediately stretched out his finger and pointed in the opposite direction of the alley that the man had just hurried into. The man who asked the question took a look, then nodded and quickly walked into the alley. At this time, the companion behind him took out a wallet from the inner pocket of his suit and stuffed 2 bills into Boss Luo's hand. After quickly saying thank you, he also chased after the man. Did I make money? Luocchio looked at his maid inconceivably. Yu Yi nodded and smiled. Yes, master made money. Luocchio smiled and shook his head, but looked at the tube of paint in his hand with more interest. It had been used, and the tail had rolled to the middle position. Lemon yellow. Vera, who was chewing gum, had just walked around the art gallery that was robbed. Because of the theft, the art gallery was temporarily closed today, and there was a cordon around it. There are guards at the entrance. Vicar, have you seen the situation in the art gallery? Vera pressed her ear. The thing that was stuffed here was the communication device between her and Vicar, who was working in an RV. At the same time, in the RV parked on the other side of the art gallery, Vicar was facing two screens, biting a piece of toast and typing on the keyboard at high speed. He seemed to be too busy. "Dear Queen Vera, do you think I'm just cracking the computer of a high school student who only knows how to browse the internet? Then I'll go in and have a look." Vera whistled. Vicar had no time to care about the toast that fell from his mouth due to surprise, and hurriedly objected. "We don't know the situation inside. Those policemen shouldn't have left yet. You'll be regarded as, well, you're the most willful queen I've ever seen." The communication was temporarily turned off. Vicar could only sigh. He had to work harder on the work at hand. For Vera, she had many ways to sneak into the art gallery, but obviously she chose the most unimpeded way. As a magician, it wasn't difficult to obtain an ID card from an employee who had sneaked out to smoke. Of course, before this, the handsome Miss Magician had changed a set of clothes and put on a pair of very clumsy black-rimmed glasses and even changed her hairstyle. Just like that, the handsome magician swiped his card and walked in under the watchful eyes of the policeman guarding the door. There was obviously a policeman who was guarding the place where the stolen painting was stolen, but there was no such person. Probably he was interrogating somewhere. Vera walked calmly, but her eyes were like a falcon. In just a moment, she had completely memorized the place where the famous painting was stolen, even the layout of every place here. She began to picture the structure of the art gallery in her mind. Suddenly, a young man walked towards her at this time and directly shouted, "Wait a minute." When he was walking in his windbreaker, a corner of the gun bag could be vaguely seen. Vera gave a start and slightly stepped back, but met the man's eyes. "What's the matter?" The man said, "Where's the bathroom?" "Oh, my stomach seems to be a little uncomfortable." "Over there." Vera pointed at the bathroom. "Thank you." The man quickly nodded. "My name is Yelgo. By the way, you look better without glasses." Vera narrowed her eyes, looking at Yelgo rushing to the place where she didn't know whether there was a bathroom or not. When she was about to leave, she heard footsteps. She hid behind the pillar, seeing a middle-aged man with a big belly hurriedly passing by and frequently looking back, as if he was afraid that someone would find him. Vera turned her eyes and quietly followed him. "Well, I have just recorded a statement with the police. Well, everything is normal. ASAP. But she could only hear such a one-sided answer. She secretly took a picture of the man's appearance with her mobile phone. Then she sneaked out of the art gallery. She took off her coat and glasses on the street and threw them into the trash can, and then returned to the RV. Vicar breathed a sigh of relief at this time, but said with a blaming tone, "I don't want to see you come back so easily because I prefer you to suffer some hardships." Vera took a bottle of beer from the fridge and opened it, walking to Vicar's side. She stretched out her hand on the table and quickly said, "This painting disappeared by itself." "You mean a magician made it go away, right?" Vicar rolled his eyes. Vera turned on her mobile phone. "Help me check who this guy is. What's his identity? Besides, can you buy some better glasses next time when you buy props?" Vicar blinked and looked confused. He nervously poked his head out and was carefully looking back at the road he walked. He could only see 2 or 3 pedestrians. It seemed that they didn't catch up with him. He breathed a sigh of relief and slid down along the wall. The strenuous exercise made his lips look slightly lighter and dry, and the pain on his legs made his facial muscles twist together. "Do you want to drink some water?" At this time, a bottle of mineral water appeared in front of him. The man subconsciously looked up and saw a man and a woman. One of them seemed to be the young man he had just bumped into. Who are you?" With a trace of hesitation and panic, the man put his hands on the wall and tried to prop up his body. "You dropped this just now." Luacho opened his palm, and the tube of lemon-yellow paint was in his hand. The man was stunned and quickly grabbed the paint from Luacho's hand and put it into his clothes. He seemed to relax a little and looked at the bottle of mineral water, subconsciously swallowing his saliva. So he quickly unscrewed the bottle and quickly drank a few mouthfuls. Then he carelessly wiped his mouth and showed a puzzled look. Someone is chasing me. Didn't they ask you for directions? He clearly remembered the distance between him and the person. So after he bumped into the person must have bumped into the man and woman. Well, I may have made a small prank. The man was stunned and hesitated. Why did you help me? Boss, Luo whispered. Sir, have you forgotten? We've seen it before. Before? The man showed a stunned expression. Boss Luo said, a few days ago in the art gallery. Sir, didn't you tell me about the nameless maiden? This was the lunatic I met in the art gallery that day. Yen PS1. I looked at the pages today and found that the clicks are half dead. Then let's increase the recommendation votes. Chapter 270. Don't you want to eat? Seeing this guy only ordered a glass of water to drink, Yuri put down the knife and fork in his hand and raised his head to ask. He had a very thick beard, and he had been wolfing down the food, so his originally terrible appearance naturally had an extra, greasy texture. Luaccio shook his head and pointed to his chin. Yuri was startled, reaching out his hand to grab the curly beard and caught a slender strand. But he didn't dislike it, and directly put the noodles into his mouth. After that, he continued to eat. After a long time, Yuri burped contentedly, not minding that he was now in a quiet restaurant. Why did you help me? You even invited me to dinner? Just because we've met before, and I don't have any impression of you? Luaccio drank a mouthful of water and said, that day Mr. Yuri said that he loved this woman. Well, about the woman in the painting, there is no conclusion in the world. I'm curious why Mr. Yuri said it in a decisive tone. Yuri was stunned. He thought of many possibilities. In this frenzy of eating, it was not only his mouth that was moving, but he didn't expect that it was actually because of such a request. Yuri wiped his mouth with a napkin and then drank a mouthful of vodka before leaning on the table, narrowing the distance between him and Luaccio. Yuri stretched out 2 fingers, pointing to his eyes, and said seriously, if I say that my eyes can see through it at a glance, do you believe it? His eyes were wide open, and there were a lot of blood vessels around his brown eyeballs. Why not? Luaccio said casually, if you believe it, then isn't Mr. Yuri a master of appreciation? It's a happy thing to know a master of appraisal. As for... Luaccio shook his head. Even if I'm cheated, it's no loss to me. Yuri opened his mouth slightly and suddenly laughed. It was the kind of laughter that was very interesting and incredible. Master, master. Yuri repeated mockingly. Yes, that's right, I'm a master. But I'm not a master of appraising paintings, but a master of painting, ha! Luaccio took another sip of water. Does Mr. Yuri have any works? Yuri poured himself 1 cup after another, and his eyes began to droop as if he were in a daze. Works? Of course. There's a lot of them. They're all over the streets. They're even used to wipe your ass in the toilets. Mr. Yuri, have you heard of the saying, just a little taste is enough? Luaccio asked as he asked the waiter for a cup of warm water, which he then brought to Yuri. But Yuri, who was obviously more interested in the bottle of vodka that was almost empty, remained indifferent. Why don't you drink when you can? We walked out of the restaurant. We weren't going to be friends anyway. You're just curious about what kind of person I am. That's why you're here with me and treating me to a meal. You probably want to know my story, right? Luaccio said, I do have such an idea. Well, I'm interested in this aspect recently. Yuri sneered disdainfully. He glanced at the man and the beautiful woman beside him and muttered, Anyway, rich people like you love to sit in warm places and listen to cold stories. You can feel the coldness of winter in front of the fireplace and sigh with emotion. You can satisfy the pity that comes occasionally. Luaccio, who didn't intend to explain anything, suddenly said, Mr. Yuri, do you need a rest? We can live upstairs. Yuri was completely like a drunk at this time. He supported his head with his palm, looking at the waiter not far away, and suddenly waved his hand. The waiter gave a start, and then walked over with a smile, politely saying, "Sir, what can I do for you?" Yuri suddenly said, "Can you dance? Take off your clothes and dance here." The waiter gave a start, but still said politely, "Sir, I think you may be drunk. What can I do for you?" Yuri shook his head and smiled, turning his head to look at Luaccio. He snapped his fingers at Boss Luo and suddenly said, "How much money do you have?" Luaccio was really curious about what this vagabond man was going to do, so he signaled to Miss Maid with his eyes. Miss Maid took out a stack of brand new large denomination rubles from her handbag and put it in front of Yuri. Yuri whistled, picking up the brick-thick banknotes and scraping them with his fingers. He then stood up with the help of the table, staring at the waiter. "Take off your clothes and dance here, and the money is all yours." Looking at the stack of banknotes in his hand, the waiter's expression suddenly became stiff. "Ha ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha, cough cough ha ha. Okay, go away." Yuri laughed, holding a bottle in one hand and a glass in the other, looking at the waiter who lowered his head and quickly picked up the clothes on the ground. In the restaurant, the waiter, who was only left with a pair of socks, a pair of underwear, and a bow tie, hurriedly grabbed his clothes and ran away. Yuri sat down again at this time. "See, it's really a good thing to have money. Just like when you asked me to stay in this hotel. The waiter obviously looked down on me. But did you see what he did just now? As long as there's money, no matter it's mine or yours, he can take off his clothes and dance." He then burped, "That stack of cash just now, for an ordinary person, you might not be able to earn that much in a year, but you took it without batting an eyelid. You didn't even react when I gave it to the waiter. You just wanted to see what would happen next. Things that can make people put down their dignity are just props for you to watch a show." Boss Luo drank the third mouthful of water indifferently. "Mr. Yuri, what do you want to say?" "Since you like to watch interesting things so much, why don't you give me a lot of money?" As Mr. Yuri said, "Money really means nothing to me." Luaccio nodded. "So it's appropriate to use it as a tool. But just now I gave you money out of curiosity, and you also showed me some interesting things. But this is just a small matter." Looking at Yuri, Luaccio said indifferently, "But Mr. Yuri, what do you think you can show me if I give you a huge amount of wealth?" Yuri laughed. "Yes, what can I see?" He seemed to be thinking hard as he shook his head again. Well, let me think. Yes, you should be able to see me enjoying a comfortable life, no longer being tired by life, seeing me going in and out of high-end places, seeing me surrounded by beauties, seeing me living a dreamlike life of ordinary people." With another hiccup, Yuri almost fell asleep. "Is this enough? But I'm not interested in these." Luaccio shook his head. "Oh, really?" Yuri's head leaned back, and his legs stretched out naturally, sitting in an extremely indecent posture. "But you can buy a lot of wealth for me. Yes. Some people can take risks for money, engage in high-risk jobs, and even get infected with diseases and overdraft their health and life. Some people can give up their dignity for money, and some people can turn against their family for money. Doesn't Mr. Yuri feel that these people are selling their important things while gaining a lot of wealth? Or they are overdrafting their lives?" Yuri pointed at Luaccio, giggling. "You mean I can sell these things to you? That's really good. Good. Puff." But before he could finish his words, Yuri fell headfirst onto the dining table and fell into a deep sleep. To him, all the words he said just now were just nonsense after drinking. Perhaps he would forget them after he sobered up. Chapter 271. He would have a splitting headache when he woke up, which should be the daily experience of people who are used to drinking vodka. Yuri had already woken up. He found himself lying on a very comfortable big bed. Yuri silently looked at the exquisite decoration on the ceiling. "I met a weirdo," Yuri said to himself. At the same time, he planned to take a bath so that his head wouldn't be so heavy. But when he sat up, Yuri saw a black card lying quietly on the cabinet on the windowsill. He subconsciously grabbed the black card. The moment his fingers touched it, Some distorted images flashed through his mind. He recalled some of the things that happened before he got drunk. Then he suddenly stood up and walked quickly to the window. The moment he opened the window, Yuri threw out the black card in his hand. He didn't know why he did that, but he had an impulse which made him feel at ease instinctively. After taking a bath and eating breakfast in the hotel lobby, Yuri looked around and suddenly didn't know where he should go, just like when he came to the city for the first time. But it was different from the excitement in the confusion at that time. Now the excitement had long disappeared and was replaced by sadness. Should I leave this place? Yuri asked himself quietly, but he soon got the answer, no. Taking a deep breath, Yuri turned around and walked into the hotel. In the hotel lobby, he sat there, staring at the big clock on the wall, and fell into meditation. But after the minute hand moved half a circle, Yuri gritted his teeth, borrowing a phone from the lobby, and dialed. Yuri tried to make himself look calm and confident. The clerk at the front desk didn't notice him, but lowered her head to work. Yuri turned around at this moment, pretending to casually look at the entrance of the hotel. The phone was connected. "It's me. You didn't think that I could escape. It's really nothing, Mr. FM. I'm in a terrible situation now. Because of this, I need you to pay me the reward I deserve. What's the point of fighting? Yes, as you said, a poor guy like me, Mr. FM, of course, thinks I can't make any waves. But, Mr. FM, do you think I'll call you directly if I don't have something in hand?" When the other side of the phone was silent, Yuri sneered, "It's very simple. I just want a considerable reward. Tonight at 8:00, Lukabayan subway station. Ask Anna to come and talk with me personally." After that, Yuri decisively cut off the communication. This was already the 27th card. They flew down from Vera's fingers for about 3 meters and then stuck on a wooden main beam, one by one, up and down, neatly arranged. Don't get me wrong, this was actually a card made of metal. If it was just a simple card, did it think it was God of Gamblers? I've found the guy's information. Vicar walked out of the room while holding the printed document in his hand. Vera, who continued to throw the 28 cards, said indifferently, "Tell me about it." "This guy's name is Yakov, the owner of the art gallery. He has been working for 13 years and came from Belarus 20 years ago. Well, he's married with a son and a daughter." Vicar said simply, "In addition, he has registered accounts in 3 different online casinos. Well, this guy has a lot of bets. But basically, he loses more than he wins. It seems that this owner's income is really good." Vera kicked her legs, turning the swivel chair to face Vicar. The 29th card made of metal flew over Vicar's head, scaring the thin man into a cold sweat. "There's something wrong with this guy." "You think this painting was stolen by Yakov?" Vicar blocked his face with the folder in his hand and walked to Vera carefully. Seeing that she didn't continue to throw cards, he was relieved and sat down. Vera kept turning the chair. "He loses more than he wins, so his financial situation must be very bad. But he can continue to bet, which proves that his family is very good. Obviously, the salary of an art gallery owner can't support him. He has extra income." Vicar said quickly, "He steals these famous paintings from the art gallery with his power and then amasses wealth." Vicar patted his head, pointing at Vera. "In order to not expose his own affairs, he framed you." Vera rolled her eyes, patting Vicar's arm away, and corrected him. "It's F&C who was framed, not me." "Well, then what are you going to do?" Vera pondered for a moment. "I just feel strange. How did he make this painting disappear by itself?" "Vicar, shouldn't you care about how to clarify this matter?" Vera suddenly stood up and put on her coat. Vicar quickly frowned. 2 days ago, the leader of a gang who ran illegal boxing matches was caught by someone, and a lot of inside stories were exposed, which implicated a lot of people. The world-famous painting was suddenly stolen. I think the police must have taken hormones now, so you'd better not mess around. Since the painting was stolen by F&C, of course, it should be in the hands of F&C, right? Vera smiled evilly. I'll go to this guy's home, and you should be ready to support me. She didn't listen to the warning at all. Didn't you say you came to Moscow for a vacation? Bang, the door was closed. Rumble. In front of the platform, when the subway car stopped, it brought a strong airflow. When it completely stopped, the platform, which was still in the rush hour, suddenly became crowded. Anna was a woman who could show the traditional beauty of Russian women. She simply carried a small long belt bag and didn't stand up until almost all the people who needed to get off the car got off and walked towards the door. With a charming smile, she walked like a model walking on the catwalk. The combination of traditional and modern beauty attracted a lot of men's attention at once. She seemed to be looking for something, looking around in the crowd. Stop! Don't turn around. Suddenly, Anna heard such a voice appeared behind her. The voice continued. Now, slowly turn to the side of the rail. Remember, don't turn around. She even felt something poking her gently at her back. Even if the other party couldn't see, Anna still showed a smile, slightly tilting her head, and whispered, Yuri, relax. I'm glad you told Mr. FM to let me talk to you. I'm so happy to see you again. Yuri sneered, Really? Would this make you happier than when you were lying on that pig FM? Anna sighed. Yuri, you should know, I also have my difficulties. I didn't really want to deceive you. Well, Ms. Anna, I'm not a kid. I won't let myself be depressed because of this kind of thing. My anger has long passed. Yuri said indifferently, I don't care if you have feelings for me or not. It doesn't matter. I only want money, understand? Anna suddenly said, I heard that you have something in your hand. What is it? Do you think I'll let you ask? Yuri sneered. Anna nodded. Well, since you're so straightforward, then I'll also be straightforward. How much do you want? Besides, don't you think it's more convincing and more advantageous for you to let us see, even if it's only a small part of it? If there's no proof, we won't give you anything so easily. At the same time, Anna quietly lowered her arm. In her palm, a small makeup mirror box quietly opened and swayed, illuminating the back. 10 million euros. No problem, but at least you have to let us see part of the evidence. Anna said indifferently. Yuri snorted. Do you think I'll let you see it? There's no room for negotiation. You can only choose to give or not. Yuri. Anna suddenly called and turned around, looking at Yuri. I told you not to turn around. Don't you want to shoot me to death? Yuri opened his eyes wide, but couldn't hide the panic in his eyes. Anna smiled, looking at the clothes covering Yuri's arm. She stretched out her hand, grabbing Yuri's arm, and opened the clothes. She moved quickly. Since when can fingers shoot bullets? Humph. Yuri snorted and said with difficulty, Even if you try it, so what? Do you think I'll take such an important thing with me? Let me tell you, if I can't go back safely tomorrow, the whole Moscow will know about you. Don't be nervous. Anna pursed her lips and smiled, taking a step closer to Yuri. Don't come over. Yuri stepped back subconsciously. Anna was still moving forward, and Yuri had to step back step by step until he felt that he was leaning against the wall and there was no way to retreat. He had to think about escaping from this place, but his arm was quickly caught by Anna. This woman was very fast. She kissed him on the lips in an instant. He had enjoyed the passionate kiss. One night after another, he was lost in this kind of gorgeous kiss. But he soon woke up. Again and again, the pain that exceeded the limits of his body caused his pupils to dilate rapidly. Anna had a small, silver, and very delicate pistol in her hand. At the moment when the subway entered the station, it rang several times in the harsh breaking and rumbling sound of kneeling. Through the clothes that Yuri had grabbed before, twice or three times. When Anna's kiss left, it was also when her hand came up to cover it. Anna stood on tiptoe, like whispering between lovers, and whispered in Yuri's ear. Dear Yuri, maybe you don't know that I know you, even better than you know yourself. Your eyes, your little movements. I remember them all in my heart. So, talking is not something a good man should do. Anna. Yuri felt that his strength was leaving him quickly. I'll miss the days with you. Anna opened the clothes and threw herself on Yuri's body like a wife. Goodbye. She stepped back, turned around, and walked into the subway that was about to leave. I shouldn't stay here. I should leave this place. He regretted it. Yuri's body slowly slid down along the wall. He didn't even have the strength to speak. When he sat down on the ground, there was a bright red color on the wall. People finally found that there was an injured man here, and it was extremely chaotic. Some came over to check, and some hurriedly called for an ambulance. Yuri just felt that the sound was getting away from him, and the light and shadow in his sight became blurred and overlapped. He seemed to catch something. When his body completely fell to the ground, he found that there was a black card in his hand. Was it the card that he threw away? Yuri didn't know, but he heard the sound. Chapter 272. In the evening, St. Basil's Cathedral. The inside of the cathedral was like a castle with several onion tops and colorful colors. It was also the place where tourists were forbidden to enter. Anatole had finished his prayer today. When he turned around, he saw Bishop Peter in a white robe. Anatole hurriedly walked to Bishop Peter and said respectfully, "Bishop, are you looking for me?" "Anatole, come with me," Bishop Peter said softly. Anatole nodded without hesitation and followed the bishop closely. He found that the place he was going to seemed to be a forbidden place. Moreover, he could feel that the holy power had become more and more intense. This was something that could only be felt by the clergyman with extremely devout faith after special practice. As for using it, it was even more difficult. Anatole was the most elite of this generation of Eastern Orthodox Church. After finishing his study in the monastery, he was appointed to practice in this church. Although he had the qualification of a priest in the Eastern Orthodox Church, he was just a fledgling in the real church. Bishop Peter, this is... Anatole had to express his doubts, but the bishop in front of him didn't say anything, but pushed a door at the end of the corridor. It was also a small church. The statue of the Holy Father was in front. Anatole found that a man was standing in front of the statue of the Holy Father. He was also in the priest's costume. Bishop Peter looked at Anatole and whispered, "Go in, relax, but also be in awe." Anatole saw a rare solemn expression on the bishop's face. This made him confused, but he could only follow the bishop's words. When he walked into the small church inside the church, Anatole found that the bishop had closed the door. The bishop didn't follow him in. After taking a deep breath, Anatole came to the priest's back. All of a sudden, he felt a majestic saint power that he had never felt before from the other party. To him, it was as deep as the ocean. God's grace was as deep as the sea. For some reason, this sentence suddenly appeared in Anatole's mind, causing him to lower his head instinctively. He had forgotten what he wanted to say at first. "Raise your head." Finally, the strange priest seemed to turn around. Anatole raised his head and couldn't help showing a surprised look. He had seen this priest before. He was the most common clergyman who received visitors in the church. How could he? "Are you Anatole?" "According to Peter, you are the youngest priest to graduate from the monastery in recent years." "Yes." Anatole didn't dare to make any mistake and nodded. However, he appeared to be unusually calm and did not panic because of the vast saint energy coming from his opponent. "My name is Sullivan." "Hello, Mr. Sullivan." Sullivan smiled faintly. There was some appreciation in his eyes, as if he was satisfied with Anatole. However, he suddenly asked, "Did you feel it 2 days ago?" Anatole nodded. There was a very pure fluctuation of faith, but it soon disappeared. "I have never felt such a pure soul aura." Sullivan suddenly said, "Do you know what it means?" Anatole shook his head. Sullivan said seriously, "It means that the soul that suddenly appeared will become a saint of the kingdom of heaven in the future." Anatole was stunned and showed a surprised look. Finally, the calmness on his face was reduced a bit. He knew what the saint of the kingdom of heaven meant. Sullivan continued at this time, Do you know that you were originally responsible for monitoring this soul? Anatoly opened his mouth and frowned subconsciously. Sir, I don't quite understand what you mean by being responsible for monitoring. Close your eyes, Sullivan said indifferently. I will remind you of what you have forgotten. Anatoly didn't obey at once. He looked at this ordinary priest who was originally in charge of receiving tourists. After a while, he slowly closed his eyes. What I have forgotten. He was still confused, but no matter what, he was really curious. At this time, Sullivan stretched out his palm and put his finger on Anatoly's forehead. At the same time, he closed his eyes and his body began to release some hazy brilliance. It was slightly white and serene. My lord! He began to speak in an ancient language. Anatoly found that he had studied this ancient language in his spare time in the monastery, but he couldn't translate it completely. He couldn't even understand what Sullivan said next. He just felt that a more majestic holy power was slowly flowing into his body like water. It seemed to be blending with the holy power in his body. Gradually, some abnormal hazy scenes appeared in Anatoly's mind. He couldn't see it clearly. It seemed that someone had said something in his ear, but he could only see half of a hazy face. The lips seemed to be moving, but there was no sound. Suddenly, Anatoly opened his eyes. He felt a stinging pain in his head. He subconsciously took a step back and had to look at Mr. Sullivan. What he saw was that Mr. Sullivan was looking at him with a kind of surprised and uncertain eyes. Anatoly didn't feel that he had remembered anything. Even the image that had just appeared in his mind gradually disappeared. Sir, I still can't remember. Anatoly said slowly, of course. There was some doubt in his eyes. Was the sea of God's grace shown by this guy just an illusion? It was very embarrassing. I know. Sullivan nodded slowly. He slowly turned around and looked up at the statue of the Holy Father in front of him. He didn't speak. It was still the sea of God's grace that Anatoly felt before he came here. But in fact, he was really embarrassed. But at the same time, he was afraid of something. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. The medical staff, wearing hospital uniforms and carrying a stretcher, hurriedly pushed the crowd aside and shouted, Where's the wounded? But when they finally arrived, they only saw a pool of blood still attached to the wall, but no one was there. Where is the wounded? Didn't you say that someone was shot? He was there just now, but disappeared in a blink of an eye. The ambulance squad leader frowned and suddenly said angrily, You tell me that a person who is shot down and bleeding so much can disappear in front of you in a blink of an eye is actually a magician who can teleport, right? But enough. This is a prank. Who called the ambulance just now? Chapter 273. Vera went out in the afternoon, but she came back when she was waiting for dinner. She had no expression. Vicar, who was familiar with her, knew it was because Vera didn't gain anything. Yakov's family has nothing. His wife is a typical housewife. His son has marijuana in his room. His daughter is a girl who likes to party but is seriously out of shape. Vera sighed. It's a typical middle-class family. Really? But I have news on my side. Vicar shrugged his shoulders. Vera sat down casually with her legs crossed and hands on the back of the sofa, waiting for the good news. Vicar, who had been used to this, sighed. To be precise, you got some news. Can you be more direct? Vera was a little impatient. Vicar could only say, An invitation letter has been sent to your private mailbox, with the time and place indicated. 3 days later, there will be an auction of the nameless maiden. My private mailbox? That one. Vera frowned. Vicar shrugged. Who else can it be? Of course it's Vera? Taktakanov. Vera was silent for a while and suddenly said, Who is the inviter on the invitation letter? Vicar said seriously, F&C. Vera suddenly said indifferently, I don't remember my private mailbox was sent everywhere. Vicar could only laugh. Dear Princess Vera, have you forgotten why you ran away from home? Although you didn't send, but there are a few big bosses in the party who care about your future life. Don't you know how many love letters from all over the world you receive in your private mailbox? These are all my. Vicar pointed to himself. I take time out to reply to you every day. Vera suddenly squinted and smiled. Are those love letters handsome? Vicar nodded repeatedly. Not bad. Some of them can be described as perfect. Vera walked to Vicar with a smile. The delicate smile on her face was like a female leopard in Vicar's eyes. He could only swallow his saliva. I didn't do anything. Really. I just asked for some photos. Vera's fingers twirled rapidly. Vicar was stunned. But his intuition told him that nothing good would happen. But experience also told him that if he didn't do it, there would be something worse waiting for him. He could only turn around. Vera sneered. She picked up the TV remote control and stabbed it into Vicar's groin. Oh, be gentle. Ouch. Do you feel good? Vera whispered in Vicar's ear. Vicar, who had clamped his legs, said bitterly, It's a bit dry. I haven't used it for a long time. Oh, gently, gently. Get me some evening gowns tomorrow. Get ready. I'm going to attend the auction. Vera loosened her hand and turned Vicar around. With a sudden force, she pressed Vicar's body onto the stool. Vicar let out a painful cry and said at the same time, Did you hear that clearly? Clear. Clear. Vera clapped her hands and returned to her room in a carefree manner. Vicar held the chair and stood up. He pulled out the remote control slowly with a weird face. Finally, he showed an incomparably comfortable expression. He sighed, feeling it didn't seem too bad. So he stared at the remote control on the ground, seeming to think about something. He was about 60 years old and dressed appropriately. Every movement of his was textbook standard. White socks. A pocket watch chain could be seen peeking out from the bag. When Yuri woke up again, he saw such an old man standing beside him. The old man's hair was gray, but he looked full of energy. This was a room that was at least 10 times more luxurious than the hotel suite he had woken up in the last time he had woken up. I should be in the subway station. Yuri hesitated. He sat up and tried to figure out what was going on. He subconsciously touched his abdomen and found that there were no wounds on his body. Even his leg, which had been injured earlier, seemed to be in perfect condition. Mr. Yuri, the hot water is ready. You can take a bath right away. The old man said with a smile, I'm not dreaming. Yuri opened his mouth. He couldn't remember when he had been so respected by such an extraordinary old gentleman. Where is this place? Who are you? Edgar. Please call me Edgar. The old man smiled calmly. This is Kajia Manor, your manor, sir. Sir, please take a bath as soon as possible, because it's extremely impolite for a noble to let the guest wait for you. My manor? Noble. Noble? The bathroom was spacious, comparable to an 80-square-meter room. Even in the connected dressing room, there were more than 20 sets of luxurious clothes. Many neckties, a quick watch, belts, hats, shoes. Even when Yuri came out of the bathroom in a daze, a gorgeous maid shaved his beard. It was so strange that Yuri felt that he was drunk in his own dream. Looking out of the bathroom window, he could only see a small corner of the manor, a huge lawn that was built very smoothly. He didn't even see the fence. He couldn't even believe that the person in the mirror was himself. His messy beard had been shaved off, and his messy hair had been trimmed until it was shiny. Coupled with his luxurious clothes, he looked like a completely different person. At the end of the corridor, Edgar was already standing in front of a room, waiting. When Yuri, who was still in a daze, arrived, Edgar opened the door for him. At the moment when the door was opened, Yuri couldn't help but exclaim, "It's you! Have a seat." Luaccio, who was drinking black tea, glanced at Yuri, who came up with a smile, and then put down the teacup in his hand. Miss Maid immediately added new black tea to the teacup. Even though there were enough servants in the manor, Miss Maid still insisted on serving her boss by herself. "What's going on?" Yuri frowned and sat down. He found that Edgar didn't follow him in, but closed the door after he came in. Mr. Yuri, have you forgotten? Luaccio suddenly asked. The thing you want from us. Yuri was stunned, and a stinging pain suddenly appeared in his head, which made him subconsciously grab his hair. His face seemed to turn pale in an instant. When his eyes recovered from confusion to reality, Yuri looked at the young man with an oriental face in amazement. No, to be exact, it was the mysterious young man. I can't believe I said something like that. He recalled the words he had said before, but he didn't say it again at this time, such incredible words. But it seemed to have become a reality. Yuri had to believe what happened in front of him. The most direct and powerful proof was not what he had encountered in this manner, but the fact that he should have died, but was still alive and well. Luaccio suddenly said, We believe that most of the words a person says before he dies should be true. Mr. Yuri, the contract has been reached. In the next month, you're not only the owner of the manor, but also the heir of the Typica family. Your identity is... Boss Luo smiled slightly. Yuri Typica, a Tsar aristocrat who was exiled abroad during the October Revolution, now lives in Morocco. Typica. Looking at Yuri's incredible expression, Luaccio snapped his fingers. At this time, Miss Maid took out a box and pushed it to Yuri on the table. Mr. Yuri, this is the seal of the Typica family as well as the family badge. These are all things that can represent your identity. I'm a noble, a descendant of a noble. Chapter 274. Later, Yuri called Edgar to his side, asking him whether he knew the two guests he had just seen. But Edgar showed a blank expression, saying, Sir, did any guests come here just now? Why don't I remember? Forgot. Completely forgot. Not only Edgar, but even the beautiful maid who shaved his beard and the strong bodyguard who worked as a part-time driver in the manor said they didn't see anyone come here. Yuri sat in the study room and stared blankly. But even though it was a study room, it was decorated like a palace. Beside him was the seal that was said to be able to use all the assets belonging to the heir of the Typica family, as well as 15% of the total assets of the family. Edgar, how much is my personal assets? Yuri asked subconsciously. Sir, your personal assets are nearly 1 billion euros. Family. What about the family? I'm afraid it will take some time to get an accurate figure from the new accounting. Edgar said respectfully, Sir, the international market is always changing. The specific statistics should be done at the family banquet at the end of the year, but the statistics last year was 75 billion euros, 15%, 75 billion euros. Yuri had to wipe his face with both hands to calm himself down. Edgar, however, did his duty well and said, Sir, are you not feeling well? Do you need a doctor? Oh, there was a private doctor in the manor. No, I want to be alone. You can go out first. Yuri calmed down and said. Edgar nodded, his hands were on his thighs, and he slightly bent down, leaving the study room straightly. Yuri subconsciously pinched his eyebrows, lying on the back of the chair, looking up at the ceiling pendant. Such a pendant, with the salary he used to work in the art gallery, it might take him 8 to 10 years or even more to afford it. But only 1 month's time. Yuri slowly closed his eyes, because he knew that such a month of extreme luxury was exchanged with almost everything he had. In the building, Anna waited for the elevator to show the number of the floor she needed to reach. Ding! She walked out of the elevator, but there were already 2 men guarding the elevator. The 2 men skillfully scanned her body with the scanner from front to back, but she seemed a little dissatisfied. Do I need to do this every time? Miss Anna, you should know that apart from Sir's family, everyone has to go through this step, one of them said calmly. The other one said indifferently, That's enough, Miss Anna. Mr. Efim is already waiting for you inside. Anna chuckled and playfully said, Fortunately, when I was sleeping with your boss, you weren't watching from the side. Otherwise, I think even if your boss was as strong as a brown bear, I wouldn't be able to get high. They pretended not to hear him. They returned to the left and right sides of the elevator like statues. Anya retracted her gaze and walked into the high-tech room. The glass walls in the room were almost 180 degrees, and the height of the building was high enough for her to have a broad view. "You're back." At this time, a stout, fat, middle-aged man slowly walked down the spiral staircase leading to the upper floor. "Has it been settled?" he continued. Anna flipped her hair with a seductive smile. She suddenly reached out her finger and slowly pressed it on her chest. She slowly moved it down and paused here, and here. 3 bullets. FM just glanced at it indifferently, then nodded and walked to the bar. He suddenly said, "How much was that guy's original offer?" 10 million euros. FM listened with no expression, as if he had just heard it. He took out 2 glasses and uncorked the bottle. After pouring 2 glasses of wine, he walked to Anna and handed her a glass. "You should mourn for him, Miss Anna." Anna smiled, gently touching the glass in her hand with FM's. "Isn't it? It's a pity that Yuri died like this." FM shrugged, "But I don't like disobedient guys. Come here, I'll show you something." Saying this, FM walked to the corner of the room, the corner in front of the glass curtain wall. There was a shelf here, and the shelf was covered with a white cloth. Anna seemed to know what it was, and her eyes lit up. "Open it." But FM walked to the sofa next to him. Anna took a step forward and lifted the white cloth on the shelf. It was the unknown maiden. Anna's eyes flashed with a trace of infatuation. She stretched out her finger and gently slid down the frame of the painting. "It's so beautiful. This is the art gallery's nameless girl." "No." Unexpectedly, FM said indifferently, "This was painted by Yuri." Anna gave a start. She couldn't help but frown, turning around and looking at the Moscow tycoon Yuri. FM chuckled. "That's why I said it's a pity that Yuri died." Anna still frowned, seeming to think of something, subconsciously saying, "Are you going to auction this fake in the auction the day after tomorrow?" "Who said it's fake?" FM said slowly the painting was stolen from the art gallery by F&C, and now F&C put it up for auction, so it's real. "I know it's a pity." Anna walked to FM with a charming smile. She even took off her high-heeled shoes and finally sat on FM. "You should have a lot of the nameless girl." "I really shouldn't let Yuri die like this, because he really did it." She originally thought that FM would sell the real stolen painting at the auction, and then use the fake created by Yuri to find a group of people who didn't know the art but got rich and make a lot of money. But she didn't expect that Yuri could pass off the fake as the real one and make an almost perfect imitation. Even just now, if FM didn't say it himself, she would have been cheated. Since he could cheat her, he could naturally cheat most of the collectors. No, all of them. Not most of them. "I'm really sorry." Anna's eyes turned, lowering her head and still smiling charmingly. "I think I should make it up to you." But FM said, "No, just help me to bid for the auction the day after tomorrow. I have an appointment to have dinner with someone. I'll go out soon." "Let me go. Let me go. Let me go. Do you know who I am? How dare you lock me up here? I want to see your president. Let me go." Someone shouted in the police station. So the young agent Yelgo, who had just come back after working hard for a long time because of the art gallery, couldn't help but frown and ask his colleague, "What's wrong with this guy?" God knows, this guy was caught stealing in a convenience store. He said, "He's the descendant of a noble family, the heir of a big family, and wants to see our president. I'm the descendant of the Tsar." Haha. Chapter 275. Genius 1, Second, remember love, go, /little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. But when the young agent walked into Sheriff Victor's office, he saw that the sheriff was packing up the things on the table, as if he was going out. "Yelgo, just in time, come out with me." Victor said directly, "To meet someone." At this time, Yelgo gave a start and asked directly, "Who?" "You'll know when you get there. Just remember not to make a fuss." Even so, Yelgo couldn't help but think. After guessing the identity of the guy in front of him, Zhang Lixing couldn't help but think. There was no eternal black and no eternal white. Violent organizations were the ones who stood in the gray, This was the last thing Yelgo's instructor taught him when he graduated from school. And now, Captain Victor was personally verifying the validity of the sentence for him. Brubov was far away from the political circle, but had a certain influence in the political circle. He started from some shady businesses. He was likely to become an oligarch in the next 10 years, but he was extremely low-key. Listening to his conversation with Sheriff Victor, they seemed to be old acquaintances and had a close relationship. Yelgo, who was secretly wondering whether Sheriff Victor had much contact with Brubov over the years, heard the conversation between the two. Auction? Yes. Brubov nodded. As far as I know, many collectors have received this invitation. Well, which group of collectors do you think you're worth? Brubov was almost 50 years old, but he still maintained his figure very well. He nodded. As far as I know, many collectors have received this invitation. Well, which group of collectors do you think you are worth? Victor furrowed his eyebrows and stared at the guy in front of him. He lowered his voice and asked, "Do you plan to join as well?" Brubov shook his head and said, "Although I'm also a collector for this painting, I don't think any famous painting collector can resist it. What a pity. If this was an auction that could be put on the stage, I would have gone no matter what. But not now." Victor nodded. He was very clear that this guy had future plans and ambitions. Under such a lofty goal, it was easy for this guy with strict self-discipline to give up some personal interests. The invitation is the identification of identity, Brubov said indifferently. So I can only tell you this, but I can't give you the invitation. As for whether you can go in or not, it depends on your own ability. I understand. Victor nodded. Although this guy wanted to completely clear his name, he obviously didn't want to offend some people who were also invited. You go out from the back door. Be careful. Brubov smiled. I have a dinner appointment with several officials. They should be here soon. When Victor left with Yelgo, Brubov's secretary came over and said, "Sir, is it okay for you to tell Sheriff Victor this?" "What's the problem?" Brubov said indifferently, "Isn't fighting crime something good citizens should do? Will the whole of Moscow know that Victor came to my house tomorrow when there were only 4 people here?" No. He knew that this was the boss's implication. F&C is the best thief in the world. Brubov squinted at this time. But what ability does this guy have to send this kind of invitation to so many people? He chuckled and walked to the door, preparing to welcome the incoming officials. I hope Victor can give me a surprise, he murmured to himself. Like an emperor's life. Yuri, who didn't enjoy this kind of life, found that even if he exhausted his imagination, he could only come up with such an adjective. Perhaps it was due to his lack of knowledge about this kind of luxurious life. All he could do was to make the absurd but luxurious life come true one by one. Is there anything different about Mr. Yuri today? There were many workers in this manor, under the management of Steward Edgar. Most of them were young and beautiful servants. Of course, they had the same fantasy as Cinderella, dreaming that one day they could catch the eye of the successor of the Typica family, even if it was just for one day. Another maid, who was wiping the glass windows in the living room, looked around and said in a low voice, "When I passed by Mr. Yuri's room just now, I heard someone moaning on the bed, so I took a glance. Nina and Vivian have taken off all their clothes. Mr. Yuri will never look at us, will he?" "God knows." The maid who was wiping the window thought for a while. "Anyway, I have never seen Mr. Yuri like, well, indulgence. Maybe he was stimulated by something. Do you know? He let people fill the bathtub with red wine and take a red wine bath." Suddenly there was a slight cough. The 2 maids found it was Mr. Edgar, so they quickly stopped talking and started to work. Edgar glanced at them and then turned away expressionlessly. Soon after, he came to the room of the owner of this manor and knocked on the door. When the door of the room opened, Edgar only saw Yuri in shorts. He was holding a wine glass, and his face was red because of drunkenness. Edgar turned his body sideways and found 2 familiar maids on the big bed were covering the quilt and sticking their heads out. Yuri was leaning on the door like a drunkard, saying, Edgar, what can I do for you? Do you want to have a drink with me? Sir, can we go to the study? I have something to show you. Yuri didn't care. Oh, Edgar, life is tiring enough. Why don't you have fun while you can? If there's anything, wait until tonight. Oh, tomorrow. Sir, there's an invitation for you. Edgar came closer and whispered in Yuri's ear. It's the auction of the nameless maiden. Yuri's face slightly changed, and he seemed to be in a daze for a while. He subconsciously put the wine glass to his mouth, and after a sip, he looked at the wine glass and put it into Edgar's hand. Wait for me here. Yuri looked back at his room and said to the two beautiful women. After saying that, Yuri walked out of the room directly. Edgar shook his head and quickly walked into the room. He picked up some clothes on the ground, but looked at the two maids on the bed and said, Go back to your post and leave this room immediately. Only then did he quickly pick up the clothes and leave as well, on the night of the auction. But to the outside world, it was just a ball, a masquerade ball. To the hotel staff, it didn't matter what the real theme of the ball was. They just had to do their best to do their jobs, because there were too many luxury cars in the hotel parking lot. This international city naturally had a large number of unknown rich people, but only the sports cars in the parking lot seemed to be enough to form a supercar club, right? This didn't include those rare limousines. To be honest, it was incredible for the hotel staff because the hotel itself was barely a 4-star hotel. That should be my fuss. There are not many people who can come to this kind of occasion as a cripple. Looking at his figure, it's probably him. Vicar, wearing a simple black eye mask and a suit that didn't fit him well, chattered and analyzed beside Vera. Today, Vera was dressed in a long black dress with spaghetti straps, with a swirling black rose ornament and a black swan feather half mask. She impatiently lifted the hem of her skirt and sped up her pace. At this time, a luxurious golden limousine slowly drove in. When the car stopped, a man in a white suit opened the door and walked out. There was no female companion, only an old man beside him. Of course, he also wore a simple mask. The man raised his head and glanced at the hotel, then pulled the lapel of his suit and directly walked past Vera and Vicar. This guy actually wears a family emblem. I seem to have seen this family emblem somewhere. Vicar said thoughtfully, It's the Typica family. Vera said slowly, An ancient aristocratic family wandering outside. It was only later that I recovered by smuggling firearms. Let's go in. Vera interrupted Vicar. I want to see the environment of the venue first. On the hotel floor, Anna looked at the parking lot with a smile. This wasn't Efem's property, but simply a hotel owned by a small boss who didn't know anything and was happy to receive a big order. Anna put on the bright red lipstick in front of the dressing table, rubbed her lips slightly, and then gently put on the golden Columbina mask next to her. Out of the room. Sir, miss, here we are. The driver looked at the rearview mirror and said he was just a car driver, so he didn't have much interest in exploring the guests' affairs. But after driving into this parking lot and seeing many luxurious cars here, the driver couldn't help but have some thoughts. These two people were probably the kind of guys who put on a false front to show off. The rent of this car was calculated by the hour. Thank you. But the man in a strange clown mask in the back seat said politely. He first opened the door and walked out, then turned around and stretched out his hand to his female companion. Then he helped her out of the back seat. The woman in a sky-blue evening dress, after getting off the car, held the man's bent arm and walked into the hotel without attracting anyone's attention. In the banquet hall, Sheriff Victor and Detective Yelgo were holding trays, watching the guests coming in one by one. The young detective had actually been standing there for a long time. Chapter 276. Genius 1 Second, remember love / go / small? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. This should be the second time that Luaccio attended an auction. The difference was that the first time was for a white jade plate, and it was much smaller. It wasn't about the scale, but the number of people that gathered here was incomparable. Yes, It was probably the first time that he appeared in front of people as the club owner. After all, it was a masquerade ball. Boss Luo, who was used to the clown mask, had no interest in choosing other masks. Although it was called a ball, under the gazes of the staff, the banquet hall was surprisingly deserted. It wasn't deserted because of the lack of people. On the contrary, there were many people here, but few people talked. Most of the guests who came here kept silent as if they had reached an agreement. Yuri, who might be attending this kind of banquet for the first time, also kept silent. He sat alone in the corner, directly asked the waiter for a hangover bottle, and casually poured himself a drink. It seemed that his behavior was incompatible with this occasion, but a few people who could recognize the emblem of the Typica family were thinking about who this person was in the family. Boss Luo just glanced at him, then withdrew his gaze from Yuri, and then looked with interest at the two waiters who were far away from each other but kept looking at each other from time to time. Luocchio felt that his fate with the police would last for a long time in this life. Your F&C? Suddenly, Luocchio heard someone say in a low voice behind him. It was a female voice. This was enough to arouse Luoccio's curiosity. He and Yu Yi turned their gaze back from the night scene outside at the same time, and found that the speaker was a woman in a black spaghetti-strap dress. There was only this woman. Obviously, the painting just now was directed at Luocchio. Are you talking about me? Luocchio asked casually. Not only the black spaghetti-strap dress, even the mask, even the lips were painted in the color of the night. This woman seemed to have a strong temptation. Since a long time ago, Luoccio's eyesight had become sharper uncontrollably, so he could easily notice that many eyes in the venue quietly fell on this woman, or perhaps on himself. Freedom and clown. Every time you appear, you always wear a clown mask. The woman said with some teasing tone, This auction is held by F&C. Isn't it reasonable that it's here? That's right. Luocchio nodded and then asked curiously, If I am, what is this lady going to do? The woman suddenly stepped forward. She came over gracefully. Luocchio felt that he should see the second black swan in his life. The woman finally came close to Luocchio. She stretched out her hands and hugged his neck. The distance between their lips was probably the thickness of their masks. If that's the case, I really want to know how you managed to get the painting out of there. I heard that she knew how to control the speed of her speech very well. When she paused, it was as if she was flirting with him. It was as if she was flirting with him on a wild dance floor. It's a means of disappearing like magic. Is there such a means? Luocchio was surprised. If so, I also hope to see it. Really, if there is a chance. The woman's black lips were floating, but she loosened her hands. Her hands slowly slid down along Luoccio's collar, and she chuckled. I don't think I should disturb you any more. Otherwise, the woman tilted her head and looked at Yu Yi, who was accompanying Luocchio, and smiled. It's too disrespectful to your female companion. But she didn't know the nature of Miss Servant Girl. Such words didn't make Miss Servant Girl angry directly. Instead, she said with a playful tone, It doesn't matter. If this lady can make him feel happy, I will also be happy. This didn't seem to be a compliment or a counterattack. Vera, who was wearing a black swan mask, unexpectedly heard a hint of permission from the other party's words. Vera smiled and said, You have a pair of beautiful eyes. Have I seen them somewhere before? At this moment, the lights in the venue suddenly dimmed, leaving only the front position. That was the stage that had been built. The spotlights were shining on a gorgeous woman with a golden mask and big red lips, which seemed to be able to evoke the beast instinct hidden in the evolutionary history of men. It seemed that after a long time of silence, the theme of the banquet was finally about to begin. But Vera lost sight of the couple at this time. She pondered for a moment and then chuckled. At this time, Vicar came over with 2 glasses of champagne and gave her a glass. Let's go back to our seats and have a look first. Vera nodded and casually took a sip of champagne, but soon she felt something wrong and couldn't help but frown under the mask. Seeing that Vera suddenly stopped, Vicar asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Vera shook her head. She put her palm to her lips and then spat out a button-sized thing from her mouth. Vicar was stunned. "Why did you swallow the tracker?" Vera said indifferently, "This thing, I just put it on a person. Then it appeared on your champagne. Did you meet anyone just now?" "Me." Vicar was stunned. "I didn't meet anyone on the way. Go back to your seat." Vera didn't say anything, and directly put the button-sized thing in her hand under the collar of her skirt. Thinking of the pair of beautiful blue eyes, which was also a man and a woman, which gave people a very special feeling, Vera subconsciously thought, how could it be so coincidental? I believe that everyone has been waiting impatiently. Anna, on the stage, said with a smile. At the same time, she clapped her hands several times. At this time, some people came out of the banquet. They drove the hotel staff out of the room and finally closed the door, guarding at the entrance. So, now let's have a look at the only item in this auction. At this time, two men walked to Anna with a box at the same time. "Open it. Show it." In the venue, there was a burst of low and continuous conversation. Anna saw that it was almost time, and then said, "We can guarantee the authenticity of this painting. If you don't believe it, you are allowed to look at it, but please don't come close." Chapter 277. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. For the hotel staff who were asked to leave the banquet hall, although they were curious, it was not a bad thing to leave. Why? Of course it was because they didn't need to work. But some people didn't want to leave, such as the young agent Mr. Yelgo. Because of the information of a businessman who didn't want to show up, they were able to sneak into the hotel in advance. Bo. "Mr. Victor, in this case, we can't see clearly what is happening inside." Yelgo had to say anxiously, "Don't be noisy." Victor frowned. He covered his ears with his hands, seeming to listen carefully, but what he could hear was basically just noise. Suddenly it became ear-piercing. Victor instinctively took off the earplugs in his ears. His face was not so good, like a defeated hound. "There's something disturbing inside, damn it!" "Then we can only wait." Yelgo frowned and said, "Why don't we break in and find out who is behind the scenes?" "That's a good idea." Victor nodded. "I'll leave this task to you." "Don't worry, I'll find a chance to collect your body." Do you know what kind of people are in there?" Victor sneered. "Even if you die here, there won't be a word about you in all the newspapers and even the web pages of Moscow tomorrow." Yelgo walked back and forth, impatiently, looking out of the corridor window. Suddenly an idea came to him. "Victor, look at this!" It was a lifting crane hanging on the outer wall of the hotel, used to clean the glass of the outer wall. "What does Yuri want to do?" Miss Maid whispered in her boss's ear with interest. Yes, it was a whisper, not a question. Luacho knew she was just curious and didn't have to know the answer immediately. Or it was just a casual question. Just look at it. Luacho whispered, "With his current identity, unless he directly kills people here, he will be safe and sound." Most of the people who survived in the darkness, shrouded by the countries, were stingy. For example, the painting was fake. This didn't cause any chaos in the auction hall, and no one immediately refuted. Instead, they simply waited and observed. However, as the auctioneer of this auction, Anna's gaze naturally drifted away for a moment. But she remained calm and looked at the man who stood up unsteadily. He was wearing a white tuxedo with a simple eye patch. She felt like she had seen it somewhere before. A sense of familiarity made Anna feel suspicious. At this moment, Anna heard a voice, Efim's voice. "Let this guy come closer. I want to see who he is." Of course, he didn't attend the banquet. Now he was sitting comfortably in his room, which was as well fortified as a fortress. He was only watching the auction through her. "Yes," Anna replied softly, and then her big red lips curved into a smile. She waved the brooch on her chest and gracefully walked down from the stage. She said, "Sir, if you think this painting is fake, you can verify it." In fact, what I allow you to do here can be verified. Anna flipped her hair and glanced around the banquet hall. I believe that a fake thing may deceive 1 or 2 people, but it can't deceive everyone, right? The two of them were already so close to each other, probably less than a meter apart. Anna could see the whole body of the man in white very well. It's the family emblem of the Typica family. Be careful and try not to be hostile to him. Anna was not clear about the so-called Typica family. However, since FM said not to directly become enemies with them, it was obvious that they had a powerful background. Then I'll verify it for you. Listening to this guy who was full of confidence, but sounded like he was drunk, Anna smiled and said, "Of course, I also want to see what unique views this gentleman has." She didn't recognize him. Yuri thought silently in his heart. Although he wore a simple eye patch, it could hardly cover the outline of his face. He used to think that the relationship between him and this woman was as beautiful as soul-blending. He was familiar with every part of her body, her smell, her movements, and her voice. He thought she was the same. But Anna didn't recognize his voice. Maybe it was because he had exchanged everything with himself. So the original Yuri didn't exist anymore? Or, in her heart, Yuri was no longer there and had disappeared in that station platform forever. Love, go little, say W, chew butt, I'm back. I've seen death and climbed back from that cold hell. Yuri took a deep breath and walked past Anna. He suddenly said, "But, as expected, this red color suits you best." His voice was so low that only Anna could hear it. The moment she heard it, she remembered that someone had said the same words. Anna suddenly turned around, looking at the back of the figure walking toward the stage. She felt a little familiar and inexplicably panicked. But the 2 men on the stage who were protecting the painting refused to let Yuri get too close. "Sir, please keep at least 1 meter away. This distance should be enough for you to see it carefully." Yuri shrugged his shoulders. He turned around and looked at all the people in the banquet hall, suddenly saying, "Before I prove it, I want to ask how many people here think this painting is real." "Oh, please don't affect your judgment because of my interruption. Don't you have confidence in your own vision? Or are you all trash and you've lost the confidence to make a correct judgment because of my words?" He almost relied on the crowd's ridicule and instantly provoked the displeasure of almost everyone here. "You're too arrogant." During the banquet, a thin old man said indifferently, "You didn't say anything, not because you can't tell whether it's real or fake, but because you're too anxious." Those who could sit here were all people who had been through a lot and were able to keep their composure. They would not choose to make trouble on such an occasion. Even if the auction was just a farce, they would treat it as an ordinary masquerade ball. Yuri understood the meaning of the old man's words. But in his bones there was an essential difference between him and everyone here. Even if he had everything now, he didn't regard himself as a person from the same world. "Really?" Yuri suddenly whistled frivolously. "Then, let me tell you why this painting is fake. Look inside this painting." He deliberately paused here, which attracted the attention of most people at once, including the men who were guarding the painting. Their eyes subconsciously looked at the place where Yuri pointed. At this moment, Yuri poured the wine in his glass onto the painting. The wine contained a lot of alcohol, which dissolved the paint of the oil painting at once. The wine on the face of the woman in the painting melted the eyes of the nameless woman in the painting. The wine mixed with the paint began to slide down the nameless woman's face, like black tears. Yuri said indifferently, "That's because this painting is now a trash." My God! He destroyed this painting. He destroyed the nameless maiden. In the eyes of so many people, he directly destroyed this famous painting like a madman. Many collectors gathered here didn't blame this madman angrily, but wailed the destruction of this world's treasures in their hearts. Catch this guy first. Anna, who was completely stunned by this scene, heard Epham's suppressed and unusually cold voice at this time. Anna reacted quickly. She quickly made a gesture to the two men on the stage. After receiving the order, the two men directly walked towards Yuri. "Sir, I think we need to have a good talk alone." Bang! Bang! Unexpectedly, before the two men were completely close to each other, two harsh sounds suddenly rang in the hall. Gunshots! For a moment, they looked at their blood-stained chests inconceivably and fell to the ground in fear. Yuri looked unusually calm at this time. He held the decanter in his other hand and slowly poured the wine on the two men's bodies. Then he filled his glass and turned around, saluting to an old man who was holding a silver pistol in the banquet hall. The old man who suddenly shot the two men was the steward of the Deepika family. Coming to such a place to participate in a shady auction, how could these people who had great influence in their respective fields not bring any bodyguards with them? When the gunshots sounded, the bodyguards of the guests had already protected their bosses at once. They also had their own weapons, and at this moment they were vigilant against anyone around them. Is this a declaration of war? Very good. This is a declaration of war. I don't care about the Deepika family. Anna, catch this guy. You must catch this guy. I want the Deepika family to compensate for all my losses. That was Efim's roar. Don't let this gentleman leave. At this time, Anna was not only making gestures, but also giving orders in an angry voice. But at this time, the door of the banquet hall was suddenly knocked open. More than a dozen men in white suits rushed into the venue. The steward said indifferently, "Protect the boss." Bang, 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 bang. Bang! Ha 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 ha! At the same time, Yuri's maniacal laughter could be heard amidst the continuous gunshots. He jumped down from the stage. In the chaotic gunshots from his own side, Anna's side, many guests, he shook his head, poured wine, drank and laughed. Then he walked to a small square table in the corner and sat down. And obviously, the boss of the club and Miss Servant Girl were sitting quietly at this table. No matter how chaotic the gunshots were, no matter how panicked the guests were when they turned over the table, no matter how many people fell to the ground at this time, and no matter how the lamps and cups were broken by stray bullets, Yuri just smiled, taking off the blindfold on his face and throwing it on the ground. He said, "Is it nice? Is it interesting? I know you must be here. I know you'll be interested in what I want to do." Luaccio said softly, "Well, it's much better to experience it personally than to see it in the movie. Is this the revenge you want?" "No." Yuri threw away the cup in his hand, pouring the liquor in the decanter directly like a beast. "This is just the beginning. I still have 29 days, right? I'm looking forward to it." Victor and Yelgo had to lean on the lifting crane on the outer wall of the hotel, mainly because the firepower in the banquet hall was a bit too strong. "Mr. Victor, support. Call for support. This is not a small matter. I know. But what we need to do now is to get out of this good idea of yours." As he said this, the cable of the crane was cut by a flying bullet, and the crane lost its balance and fell down to the ground. In the cold wind, the young agent Yelgo and Sheriff Victor, who just came back to work after half of his vacation, were shaking. Yelgo said that he was actually afraid of heights. So, Chapter 278. Vickers squatted down and moved under the long table on the side of the banquet hall where various food and drinks were placed. He felt that even this was not safe, so he quietly took a silver plate and stuffed it into his clothes. "Is this useful?" Vera beside him couldn't help but roll her eyes. Vicar quickly said, "Nokia hasn't produced for a long time. It's better to take this than nothing. Are these guys from the Deepika family crazy?" Vera stuck her head out to take a look and quickly said, "I don't know if they're crazy or not, but I know that you must be crazy to buy me such a dress. Do you know how inconvenient it is?" "Oh, I will pay attention next time." "No, I don't want to have a next time." Vera frowned at this time. In the chaos, she saw the guy who poured wine on the nameless maiden. At this time, he sat down. There were already two calm people sitting at the table where he sat. "It's them." Vera uttered in astonishment. Vicar, who didn't dare to look out, said nervously at this time, "What do you mean they are yours?" Vera pondered for a while, squatted down and took off her high-heeled shoes directly. Then she tore the skirt until it almost reached the bottom of her thigh. She glanced at Vicar. "Where's your weapon?" "Oh, yes, my weapon." Vicar hurriedly dug out his clothes. "I found it." He hurriedly took it out, and the thing in his hands was the remote control. It seemed that Vicar also found that the thing he took out was a little bad, so he quickly stuffed it back into his clothes. Then he dug again. After a while, he took out a short one, which was even smaller than a palm, from his back. "How is it? Is this okay?" Vera sighed. She stretched her hand out of the table and found another iron plate. She handed it to Vicar and blessed him. "The great revolutionary pioneer, Vladimir, will bless you." "But I have never been to Lenin Square to mourn him. Vera. But Vera had already rolled out of here. Vicar, who didn't dare to go out and had never been to Lenin Square, felt that even if Vera gave him another iron plate, it was still not safe. So he took one more plate and continued to stuff it into his clothes. There were 3 plates in total. He felt that he was too damn witty. "Why are you interested in these things?" Yuri suddenly looked at him and asked. The clown mask in front of him had its own smile. Yuri couldn't help but think that no matter what the club's boss would say next, it would be a mockery. Sitting in a warm place, listening to a cold story, feeling the coldness of winter in front of the fireplace, Luaccio said slowly, "This is what you said before, Mr. Yuri. I think it's good." Was he mocking him? Why did he have to repeat what he said before? But Yuri wasn't dissatisfied at all. Perhaps in his heart he had already determined that if it weren't for the mockery, he wouldn't have used such a method to fulfill his wish. "I never knew your name." Yuri shook his head and laughed at himself. He was also looking at the situation around him. Normal people would be frightened in such a bad and dangerous situation, but he didn't think he was. He only knew that he didn't have much time left. He also knew that he had already died once. Now, there was nothing to be afraid of in every minute and second that he lived. But before he could get an answer from the other party, a voice he was familiar with cut into the conversation between him and the club owner. Yuri felt that his shoulder was pressed by someone, and soon the other party put her arm around his neck and strangled him. It wasn't too tight, but it wasn't too loose either. It was the kind of tightening that was more threatening. At the same time, he also felt that his son was pressed against by something cold. "Mister, please immediately stop your subordinates' actions before things get out of hand." Anna. The person behind Yuri was Anna. Yuri closed his eyes, trying to erase the smile on the clown mask from his mind. At the same time, he said, "Anna, don't you want to see who I am?" "Who are you?" Anna frowned the moment she was called by her name. Yuri said indifferently, "I've taken off my blindfold. You'll know if you see me." Yuri stood up, patting Anna's arm around his neck, gently. "Relax. You're calm, confident, and the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Why do you want to destroy your beauty with this ugliness?" Anna hesitated for a moment and looked around. She found that ever since she held this guy hostage, those guys in white suits had stopped and were approaching her one by one. The battle in the banquet hall suddenly fell into a stalemate. Anna took a deep breath, moving her head from Yuri's son to the back of his head, saying in a low voice, "You can turn around." Yuri turned around. Anna's pupils widened in an instant, and she opened her mouth, subconsciously. Yuri slightly raised his hands, whistled, and said softly, "Anna, you see I even resisted, right? Why, don't you recognize me? Or did you forget what I look like just because I shaved? Didn't you shave for me before?" "Impossible," Anna murmured in horror, but her finger almost instinctively squeezed the trigger of her gun. But at this moment, a sharp pain came from her wrist. A shiny knife had already been stabbed into the back of her hand. It had almost pierced through the back of her hand. Anna screamed and fell to the ground. A man in a white suit, who was still approaching quietly, directly rushed over and threw Anna to the ground. Then he grabbed her hands and put them behind her back, completely subduing her. "Boss, what you did just now was too dangerous." The old butler pulled up his clothes to cover the knife on his waist. Then he walked to Yuri's side and frowned. Yuri was amazed that this old man had such a flying stunt, but he just shook his head. He walked to Anna, looking at Anna, who was looking at him in horror. He stretched out his hand and stroked her face, saying softly, "I'm back. You said you wouldn't forget me. Can you carve it deeper now?" Anna shook her head unbelievably. It was really him, Yuri, who used to be a talented painter, but was so poor that he had to live on the street. How could he be a member of the Typica family? More importantly, why didn't he die? "Boss, what should we do with these two guys?" Suddenly, the voice of a subordinate of the Typica family came from behind Yuri. He turned around and saw the club boss, who gave him everything was guarded against. "Be polite. These two are my most important friends." Yuri waved his hand. Bang, 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 bang. Then he took the gun from Edgar's hand and suddenly hit the ceiling, saying in a shocking tone, "Listen, 2 days later, I'll hold the shooting of the real, the nameless maiden. Yuri, the heir of the Typica family, will give you enough compensation for today's incident and all the fright you've received." Chapter 279. The Auction of the Real, the Nameless Maiden. When Yuri said this, the shock of these invited collectors was no less than that of his act of pouring wine on the stage. It was even more shocking than that. As for the gunfight that just happened, probably for these people it was a common thing, and there was nothing strange about it. There's a second, the Nameless Maiden. Is the one you just destroyed really a fake one? Since this lunatic had already revealed his identity and was still acting so calm, it was naturally easy for people to believe his words. He just drank a little more wine, not because of taking hemp, so he didn't need to joke here with the reputation of the whole family. What's the matter? The painting was obtained by and the auction was also initiated by it. But the painting is fake and in your hands? Oh, I'm a bit confused. You just want that painting. As for what happened in it, do you really care? Yuri asked calmly, and then said, "As for the painting, you can see it in 2 days. As for the location, my butler will tell you later." After messing up the auction like a lunatic, Yuri bowed in front of the crowd in an abnormal, gentlemanly manner. "So, goodbye, everyone." He turned around and walked towards the door, but suddenly turned back after one step, as if he remembered something. "Oh, I've told my people to only target the organizer of this auction. You see, many of my people are injured, but your people seem to be fine. So I think you won't embarrass me, right?" With that said, Yuri ignored the expressions of the many guests at the scene and nodded at several of his men in white suits. One of them knocked Anna on the back of her neck and knocked her out. Then he took his people and left with Yuri. "I'm really sorry to disturb your mood." Mr. Edgar, the steward, was finishing his work. "We'll be sure to entertain you well in 2 days' time." Although his tone and actions were impeccable, he was speaking in an absolutely powerful manner. "As for the location," Edgar quickly told an address and said with a smile, "Anyway, the Typica family is still willing to make friends with you." At this time, 3 men in white suits pointed their guns at 2 people in waiters' clothes and took them to Edgar. "These 2 guys have been hiding on the lifting crane for cleaning the outer wall." He walked to Edgar, lowering his head and whispering, "They're policemen." Edgar's eyes shrunk imperceptibly. He glanced at Yelgo and Victor and found that the 2 policemen who somehow sneaked in were very calm at this moment. They probably knew that any extra actions and words would put them in a more dangerous situation. "Take them away first. Don't make it public," Edgar said indifferently, and he still maintained his calm demeanor. This old butler seemed to be more like a boss than the people here. He glanced at the crowd and bowed with the most standard etiquette. "Then I'll go first, everyone." "Nonsense." "Humph." After the people of the Typica family left completely, in the corner of the banquet, a fat man suddenly patted the table beside him. "The Typica family! They're just a group of boorish men who only know how to sell weapons. What's so great about them?" "Humph." Although he said so The fat man didn't seem to want to continue the discussion here. He waved his hand and left the banquet hall with his people. Seeing the fatty leave, the rest of the guests seemed to have tacitly agreed. They didn't say anything and continued to leave the place. What a joke! After the gunfight, they naturally couldn't stay at the scene. The more they left, the less trouble there would be. Anna's side, namely Ephraim's, people didn't dare to move at this time. After Anna was taken away, another person immediately took over the job of controlling the scene under Ephraim's order. Ephraim didn't want to continue to offend these guests who were obviously unhappy, so he didn't intend to stop them. It seemed that no one noticed the very quiet table. They might have noticed it, but subconsciously didn't think there was anything wrong. Auction the Real, the Nameless Maiden. Luaccio looked out of the window at this time. The bullets had already caused many glass walls to burst with broken window flowers. This time Luaccio didn't choose to do anything, but at the same time it seemed unknown what kind of ending Yuri as a new guest would go. After staying like this for a while, Luaccio suddenly stretched out his hand and knocked on the table lightly, and then said indifferently, "Don't you want to come out? We're leaving." The tablecloth of the table was suddenly turned over, and a figure crawled out from under the table. It was slightly different from when he had seen her not long ago. This young lady had already torn her own long dress. The long dress had changed, but it still looked more fitting. Vera first glanced at the scene. She found that the entire banquet hall was empty, except for the 2 people at the table. Well, including her, there were 3 people. She sat down on the table with her hands behind her back. Her upper body leaned back slightly. "When did you find me?" "Actually, I just knocked and had a look." But he didn't expect the club's boss to say something like that. Luaccio gestured with his hands. "Haven't you watched a movie? The last person left behind might not be the last person left behind. Knock on the door and trick them, and there will still be new people who will emerge." Vera couldn't help laughing. "Are you treating everything that happened here as a movie?" Luaccio whispered, "I think it's much better than a movie." "Who are you?" Vera lowered her head. Sitting on the table, she was naturally taller than Luaccio and Yi, who were sitting on the stool. "Why did Yuri just sit here and talk to you?" "Miss, don't you think it's impolite to get too close?" You reminded her at this time. Vera shrugged and made herself sit up straight. "Miss Vera, let's call it a day." Luaccio stood up at this time. "I'm just a businessman. If Miss Vera wants to do business with me, we'll welcome you at any time." She was surprised that he could directly call out her name. While she was secretly guessing who this person was, she calmly asked, "Is that so? I don't even know what kind of business you do, let alone whether you have an address or something like that. Isn't such a welcome too insincere?" "If you need, Miss Vera will find me," Luaccio whispered. "As long as you think of me in your heart, I'll appear in front of you." Vera's eyes were flickering, seeming to be interesting, and also seemed to feel a strange feeling. She was not interested in this man, but she was very interested in his words. The mysterious aura seemed to be emitted from this person all the time, which was a fatal attraction for her, who had an almost morbid instinct to explore. She suddenly wanted to destroy this atmosphere. This was her nature. She didn't like to be in a passive situation all the time. She got down from the table and walked up to the mysterious guy. She whispered in his ear, "Is that so? Even if I'm in my room, you'll appear?" "Yes, even if Miss Vera is in your room, as long as you need me, we'll appear in front of you." Luaccio didn't intend to move, but there were some things he didn't want to explain very carefully here. But there were also some things he was very interested in. "Because Miss Vera has a beauty that fascinates me." "Thank you for your compliment." Vera indifferently distanced herself from him. She instinctively hated the word beauty appearing on her. When the door of the banquet hall was opened again, Vicar came out from his hiding place, hurriedly running to Vera's side, asking curiously, "Who's that man and woman?" "Weirdo. And he's a weirdo who knows my identity," but Vera didn't say it out. The calmness of the conversation didn't disappear until now. Vicar rarely saw Vera trying to hide her uneasiness. There was no doubt that Vera had a pair of perfectly proportioned long legs, and because of the torn skirt it was more eye-catching. But for Vicar, this was far less eye-catching than the change of expression on her face. My God! In addition to those old fogies in the family, there was someone who could give this lady a headache. Am I having an illusion? Such thoughts began to emerge in Vicar's mind. Although I failed once, I should have tried again just now and put a tracker on this guy. Vera gently bit her fingernail and said to herself. However, such a move made Vicar feel a sense of abruptness. What kind of feeling was that? Probably, I'm going to die. What are you looking at? Vera suddenly looked at Vicar, frowning. Vicar hurriedly shook his head and then said, waiting for your order. You're the boss who pays my salary. Vera rolled her eyes. Then she suddenly reached into her chest and took out a small makeup mirror from the low-cut evening dress. After the folding mirror box was opened, what appeared was not a mirror, but something more like a screen. Vera chuckled, putting it into Vicar's hand. Stare at it and see where it stops. This is the position of the boss of Tipica's family. Vera said indifferently, I secretly put it on his shoe sole. Chapter 280. Anatole didn't know why Mr. Sullivan, who gave him a mysterious feeling, brought him to this place. In Anatole's view, this place was just a very ordinary house, but Sullivan asked him if he remembered anything after coming here. Anatole knew that Sullivan was talking about his amnesia. Anatole felt that he didn't forget anything. But whether it was Sullivan's words and deeds, some of the bishop's words, or even the sudden breaking of his cross, his rational analysis led him to the conclusion that he really forgot something. I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan, I didn't remember anything. Anatole shook his head. Sullivan nodded, as if he had expected this. It's not just you. The people who live nearby don't know who originally lived in this house. Anatole asked curiously, who used to live here? Sullivan said slowly, it was a widower with a 10-year-old child. They should have just left for a few days, because some food in the refrigerator is still in the preservation period. But, seeing that Sullivan paused here, Anatole suddenly became more attentive. Sullivan looked at the house in front of him at this time, seeming to be puzzled. We can't find the whereabouts of the father and son. It's like they disappeared from the world. Anatole frowned. If they were just ordinary people, how could they hide from the eyes of the monastery? I'm afraid they are not ordinary people. Sullivan stared at Anatole with great meaning. Anatole didn't know whether it was an illusion or not. At the moment when their eyes met, Anatole seemed to feel some slight fear from Mr. Sullivan's eyes. Anatole, you need to go with me to the monastery's headquarters. Sullivan suddenly said. But Anatole, who had just graduated from the monastery and had just been appointed here, was very puzzled. Sullivan said indifferently, there are more restrictions on my body. I can't use any complete divine spells in this place, so I can only go to your monastery, where I can release my magic to my heart's content. Anatole was startled, because he heard Sullivan just say, your monastery? The two priests who had just left did not know that a pair of eyes had been watching them from the door of the house they had been observing all this time. Luaccio was sitting on a chair in front of the house. Yui, who had been scrolling through his phone, was not here. Of course, it wasn't that Luaccio deliberately didn't want her to be here. She just woke up early to prepare breakfast and went to the supermarket to buy things. Luaccio was no longer in the hotel where he first lived. After Oleg and Antonio left Moscow quietly, they moved in here as a temporary place to stay. It was not that the hotel apartment prepared by Miss Maid was not good. However, he felt that it was more tasteful to stay here. For example, the rocking chair in the corridor in front of the door made him feel like he didn't want to move. The hotel apartment didn't seem to give him that kind of experience. There was a remnant taste of happiness here when Kamala was still reborn. All of you. After the two priests left completely, Luaccio looked up at the morning sky. In human cognition, There seemed to be something in the sky. But Luaccio, who had seen the club's old account books, was very clear that there was nothing in it. It existed, but it was not in the sky nor on the ground. Heaven still needs 3 more years. Luaccio stretched and stood up from the chair. He put on the headset of his mobile phone, then gently kicked his shoes, jogging out of the road outside, along the road of the community, running all the way. Such a morning was very suitable for jogging. On the way, Luaccio met a lot of people who also chose this time to jog on the road. People who liked sports seemed to be full of enthusiasm in their lives. He met a lot of people who greeted him, men and women of all shapes and sizes. They might be enjoying the scenery along the road. In their eyes, these scenery were the colors of figures. Luaccio didn't know. He had the concept of color, but to him, all colors seemed to be a single hue. They were mixed together in a messy manner, seemingly with a pattern, but also without a pattern. The whole world seemed to have turned into a world of black and white. However, he suddenly slowed down his pace and finally arrived in front of an old house. It was a painting painted on the wall of someone's house. It would be more appropriate to call it graffiti. The graffiti was not colorful, far from the bright graffiti on the street, which could attract people's attention. It was also not the kind of thing with a sense of irony, which could strongly express the graffiti owner's dissatisfaction with society, which could resonate with people in society. It was just a simple sketch of a city on a brown wall using black lines. But this city was not drawn according to scale. It was distorted, just like the reflection of the city in a mirror. The straight buildings became fat, and the neat roads became crooked. Luaccio reached out and touched the wall, then pinched his finger. It didn't look like it was drawn with charcoal, but more like it was drawn with charcoal. The lines were rough. There was a period of time when I would pass by here every day. Suddenly, someone spoke behind Luaccio. Luaccio turned his head and saw a man wearing a mask and a cap, dressed in running clothes. It should be a middle-aged man. He gave off a very robust feeling. Luaccio just glanced at it, then raised his head and took 2 steps back so that he could take in the whole painting. The middle-aged man behind him also stopped here and looked up, quietly looking at the distorted Moscow on the wall. He suddenly said, "This painting is not finished." "Yes." Luaccio nodded. The man seemed to be a little regretful. "About a year ago, I started to run around here in the morning. Occasionally I saw a young man painting here. It was in the winter, so I had a deep impression of him. His clothes were very thin, and his face was very bad, like a homeless person. But he didn't seem to feel cold at all. He was only holding a piece of charcoal. When I saw it, the painting had already drawn a building. He seemed to be telling a story that he rarely shared with people, a story that was shared with strangers. I observed him for several days. One day, I couldn't help but go up and ask him. The man with a mask and a cap looked at Luaccio at this time and seemed to smile. I asked him why he didn't burn the charcoal in his hand to warm himself when it was so cold. "What did he say?" Luaccio asked casually. He didn't answer me. The man shook his head, but he asked me a question. He said, "Do you have a dream?" "Dream?" Luaccio thought. The man also nodded casually. "Yes, dream. To be honest, I don't know if I have a dream or not. But later, I would always take some time to run around here for a while. On one hand, it was to exercise. On the other hand, I think I probably wanted to see how long this guy could persist." He shook his head. "Unfortunately, this painting was not finished. I haven't seen him for a long time. However, I would still run here occasionally, thinking that maybe I would meet this guy again and take a good look at this unfinished painting." "It is fascinating." Luaccio smiled. The man also said softly, "Yes. Looking at this unfinished and distorted city, it always gives me a different feeling, as if it is always on guard against me. I can't let myself live in such a distorted city." We talked about some boring topics. "Nothing." Luaccio shook his head. The man began to run. He suddenly reached out and patted Luaccio's shoulder. "Young man, you are from China, right?" "I have been to this country several times. It's a very good country." But since you can speak Russian so well, you may consider staying here to develop yourself. Young man, there will always be opportunities. It's the same wherever I stay. Luaccio shook his head. The man gave a start and didn't seem to care about the meaning of this sentence. He nodded and ran away. But not long after he ran out, a black car slowly followed behind him. Luaccio turned around and looked at the graffiti on the wall. This was actually a painting painted by Yuri, but he was now in the manner of the Typica family. Perhaps he was greeting Miss Anna, who was brought back last night. Dream. Chapter 281. Different from the bad treatment she had imagined. She was treated like a princess except for freedom. Anna opened a small corner of the curtain. Looking at the outside environment, just below the room, 2 men were guarding. Similarly, there were guards outside the door of the room. Her clothes had already been changed under the maid's unyielding attitude, and her entire body had been checked thoroughly. Anna had no way to contact FM, let alone the outside world. So her current situation was forbidden. She didn't even know whether FM had seen Yuri's appearance through the brooch she wore. The brooch had been destroyed on her way to the manor. He was a subordinate of the Typica family, or Yuri's subordinate. But Yuri's subordinate? Shouldn't he just be a painter who wandered the streets and failed to achieve his goals? His identity should have been thoroughly investigated long ago. Was there a mistake somewhere? The door of the room was suddenly opened at this time. Anna turned around vigilantly, looking at Yuri, who grasped the door with both hands when the door was opened. It was really Yuri. You guys wait outside. Yuri turned back and ordered. Anna clearly saw a few more men with serious looks outside the door. They nodded and didn't say anything. However, when their eyes swept over her body, there was no hint of kindness in them. Yuri closed the door. He stuck to the door of the room. Didn't come up for a while, didn't say anything, but just looked at Anna quietly, which made her more confused about what he wanted to do. Did you have a good rest last night? Yuri suddenly smiled and said, This room should be the best one apart from mine. Anna tried to keep calm. I think Mr. Yuri wouldn't feel too good if you were in my place. You call me Mr. Yuri? Yuri shook his head. He seemed to think of something, and finally walked towards the corner of the room, the cloakroom. He opened one of the wardrobes, selecting the clothes inside while saying casually, But I didn't change my place, did I? I slept very well last night, with 2 beautiful girls hugging me. Well, I think last night must be the best sleep I've had recently. Really? Congratulations, Anna said to Yuri. The distance between the 2 of them was the distance between the window and the wardrobe. It was the furthest distance that could be found in this room. Anna put her hands behind her back and slowly pulled out a toothbrush from her sleeve. The handle of the toothbrush was broken, and the broken end was sharpened to a very sharp point. This was probably the most meaningful thing Anna had done since she woke up. It also gave her a cheap sense of security. Finally, Yuri chose a set of clothes from the wardrobe. He held it in front of him and looked at Anna with a smile. Do you like this dress? Anna frowned. It seems that you want me to wear it. You're still as smart as before. Yuri looked at him approvingly. He put the clothes on the bed, but did not say anything else. He walked straight to the door. Someone will bring you out later. I hope you'll have changed by then. Oh, right, don't do anything unnecessary. To be honest, I really don't want to see you holding a weapon, he said, pointing to the corner of the room and then to his eyes. This made Anna think of Efim subconsciously. He was also a person who liked to hide in the dark and peep at everything. Anna took a deep breath. At the moment when Yuri left, she stretched out her hand and pressed the windowsill. Her face was a little ugly, looking at the clothes on the bed. Now, this feeling was really terrible. But what was worse was that she couldn't figure out what Yuri wanted to do. Time to eat. A man came in with a plate of food. This was the basement of the manor. Or it was more appropriate to call it a dungeon. Yelgo thought this was probably not an experience that he should be proud of. As the National Police, he and Victor were currently trapped in this place by this group of thugs. But what was worse was that the man who came in with the food was not coming towards them. He was just delivering food to the other guard who had been watching over them all this time. Yelgo, who had not eaten anything since last night, even without drinking water, was so hungry. The cloth tied around his mouth made it impossible for him to have a good talk with Victor, even though Victor was right next to him. But both of them were tied to the wall. "Don't we kill these two guys?" The man who brought the food sat down casually and asked his companion. His companion shrugged. Boss said to keep them alive. But Mr. Butler also said that if they tried to escape, he showed a grim smile, using the dagger in his hand to slowly cut his neck. It seemed that if this happened, it would be the most expected thing. It was simply the worst thing. Yelgo narrowed his eyes. He felt that he was still immature, and the fear almost made his mind explode. Perhaps he should have learned from Mr. Victor, who was calmer than he was. Yelgo subconsciously looked at Victor. He found that Victor lowered his head. He fell asleep. "Damn, I'm so hungry." But this young agent Yelgo didn't know that his experience was seen by two different eyes. The owners of these two eyes quickly left through the small window that could peep into the cellar, because this manor was not a place to stay for a long time. One of the owners of the two eyes even said with concern, "Vera, are you really going to steal the painting from here?" "Steal? No." The other owner shook his head and said indifferently, "If we steal it, we can't see what the owner of this manor is going to do." "That's right, wait for me, wait." Vicar had to cover his mouth for fear of making a louder sound. He hurriedly followed the figure who always walked in front. "Boss, Miss Anna is here." "Got it, you can go out first." Yuri nodded and ordered, "Yes, boss." All of a sudden, only Yuri and Anna were left in the spacious room. Yuri glanced at Anna, who was wearing the new dress, and smiled. "This dress really suits you." Different from Yuri, Anna was looking at every part of this room. She finally looked at the front of Yuri. There were easels, brushes, and some painting tools. There were a lot of things on the paper, so Anna recognized what Yuri was drawing at a glance. She frowned and said subconsciously, "No wonder you also said that you want to auction the Nameless Maiden. You're going to draw another one." Yuri picked up the brush and didn't look at Anna. He just concentrated on mixing the paints and said indifferently, "Come and accompany me. You can always give me inspiration and let me know where to start the painting. I need to hurry up. After all, I have to do a special year treatment." Anna said in astonishment, "You captured me just to make me accompany you in drawing." Yuri looked at Anna, but she couldn't tell what kind of feelings he had. Anna felt that she was looking at the man who used to have the most intimate relationship with her through ice. She suddenly felt that it was so vague. Yuri put his finger on his lips and made a shushing gesture. "Don't talk. Just stay with me, quietly. No matter how much money we get from the auction, it will all belong to you." Anna opened her mouth slightly. She felt that she had heard the most incredible words in her life. She pursed her lips, thinking about the truth of Yuri's words, and slowly walked to the easel and sat down. Yuri suddenly closed his eyes, with the brush in his left hand and the palette in his right hand. It was just a habit before he started to paint. Anna knew this. When Yuri opened his eyes and started to paint, Anna suddenly had a feeling. Even if she was sitting here, Yuri didn't see her in his eyes. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt a kind of sadness that she didn't understand. It was as if she was the one who had been abandoned. In the luxurious manner, Yuri was waving his best paintbrush, forgetful of everything. In the simple residence, the club boss who just came back from his morning jog was holding a rag and wiping a destroyed painting selectively. Of course, he was wiping only the frame of the painting where the pigment was dissolved. As for the painting itself, it would only get worse as he wiped it. This was the one that was destroyed in the hotel last night. Such a destroyed painting, no matter who saw it, seemed to have completely lost its original value. But even so, it should still have its historical value and should not be lost because of this. But it was not real, so it was abandoned. Just last night, outside the wall of the hotel parking lot. It was ruthlessly destroyed by its original owner and abandoned by its subsequent owner. Then it was picked up by the club boss like picking up garbage. Sure enough, he's not a professional painter for 30 years. It's impossible to restore it. Luo Qiu looked at the messy place and then looked at the rag in his hand. He shook his head in self-mockery and stretched himself. So, he gave up this stupid method and then gently touched the destroyed painting with his palm. The pigment mixed with alcohol began to separate slowly, moving little by little, as if returning to its original place. When a little bit of alcohol that didn't belong to the painting was separated from the canvas and finally fell into a glass placed in the narration, the abandoned painting returned to its original appearance. Luocho looked at it and nodded with satisfaction. Chapter 282. Still no news of Anna. Sorry, boss. In the end, we only found this thing on the side of Fifth Avenue. The man took out a broken brooch. Inside the building, FM was looking at his man. He had a good demeanor, especially when he accompanied those politicians to eat. But in his own place, he didn't think it was necessary to maintain such a demeanor. Thus, he snorted coldly and splashed the unfinished wine on his subordinate's face. He snorted coldly and said, "Humph, trash." The man wiped his face to make sure he was not angry, then slowly said, "Boss, last night the guy called himself Yuri from the Typica family. So many guests have heard it. Don't you think we should contact this family and ask them what happened?" FM continued to snort. Contact them? This auction is held in the name of F&C. If you ask me to contact them, are you telling them that I'm the one who stole the painting? Boss, I mean, we can continue to contact the Typica family in the name of Freedom and Clown. Idiot. Who is this Typica family? Do you think they will pay attention to a little thief? FM angrily walked back and forth in front of the sofa. Suddenly, the elevator behind opened, and a man came in. "Boss, there's a letter for you, but there's no name on it." "Who sent it?" FM frowned. "Just a kid, he shouldn't know anything." The man quickly said, "But it also said that you will need the things inside." "We've checked it. There's nothing dangerous inside." FM narrowed his eyes, but didn't take over the envelope, but said indifferently, "Open it and see what's inside." The man had to open the envelope, sealed with wax directly. "This is an invitation." He was stunned, then raised his head, looking at FM, and slowly said, "It's an invitation to you to attend the auction." FM was shocked. He directly grabbed the invitation from his man's hand, glanced at it quickly, and then frowned. He couldn't help recalling the scenes he saw through the lens hidden by Anna's brooch last night. The last scene was too vague for him to see clearly, but he could clearly hear every word that the guy called Yuri said. He would auction the real, the nameless maiden. FM didn't think that he also had this painting. What he thought was that this guy had already announced the auction in front of all the guests, so there was no need to send another invitation. Furthermore, this was an invitation that had been sent to this place. "You go out first," FM indifferently ordered. Until the two men left, he couldn't help walking up the spiral staircase to the upper floor. He pressed a button. One of the bookcases here opened automatically. There was a hidden door. FM entered the password to open the door. Here was his collection room. When he saw the real, the nameless maiden was still here, he was slightly relieved. However, the invitation letter in his hand. He had to think in the worst direction. Did the Typica family know something? Yuri. FM muttered to himself. He couldn't regard a down-and-out tramp and the heir of the crazy family as the same person. The same name might be a coincidence. Anna said that when she killed Yuri at the platform, she found that his so-called evidence was just a lie used to cheat. Is Anna lying to me, and Yuri didn't die at all? FM frowned. He suddenly grabbed the phone, dialed one of the numbers, and put on a smiling face. "Black, old man, how are you recently?" "Oh, is that FM? Not good. I'm so annoyed recently. You know, the scandal of the collusion between politicians and gangs in VK was exposed last week. My superiors bombarded me almost every day. Recently, a famous painting was stolen. The voice of the person on the other end of the phone became softer. Our president has also spoken. Old friend, if we still can't find the culprits for these two cases, I might even become the scapegoat and retire early. FM sighed. Yes, a scandal, a stolen painting, and a shooting in the subway station. I really feel sorry for you. Wait, old man, what did you say? What shooting in the subway station? Why didn't I hear about it? When did it happen? Where? FM gave a start. But soon he laughed and said that he was wrong. Yuri didn't die as expected. Anna lied to me. But he also squinted his eyes, calculating something secretly. On the day of the second auction. Although it was called an auction, this auction was even more informal in such a private place. It could even be said that it was someone else's territory. An auction held in such a place was not safe at all. It could even be said that the owner of this place, the heir of the Typica family, had no sincerity at all. However, when one of the big shots brought his men here with the intention of giving it a try, he was surprised to see that there were already quite a few people gathered here. It was still the same masquerade party that night, but the taste was completely different. Almost all the guests today didn't bring women, but more people came to protect them, and most of them were murderous guys. Although they were also secretive, people who were familiar with each other could probably guess who the other person was, right? The collectors stood outside the manor one by one. Soon after, the iron gate of the manor opened, and the steward of the manor walked out gracefully. He glanced at his pocket watch, smiling slightly. It's not time yet, but I'm very glad that you gentlemen can be so punctual, although there are not as many people as that night. Everyone, please follow me in. Mr. Yuri has been waiting for you inside for a long time. Wait a minute. I'm going in with my men, the thin man said gloomily at this time. Edgar smiled slightly. Of course, Mr. Yuri is very democratic and doesn't intend to embarrass you. You can go ahead, but I hope you can restrain your men. If something happens to them when they wander inside, it's not within the scope of our compensation. Edgar watched as the big shots led their subordinates into the manor one by one. They were like statues. Until the last car entered the manor, he was still waiting, because it was not time yet. Abiding by the rule of time was one of the things that this old man abided by. The last 10 minutes. A delicate carriage slowly entered the entrance of the manor. Yes, it was a carriage. The man with a clown mask got off first, and then intimately reached out to lead his female companion out of the carriage. The two slowly walked to Edgar. Chapter 283. It's not too late. Both of you are Mr. Yuri's distinguished guests. Edgar smiled. He told me that I'd better wait for you here before the auction starts. Thank you. Luaccio nodded. Then let's go in. Edgar also nodded and said, The carriage that this gentleman drove today is very suitable for our manor. Really? Luaccio said with a smile. It's chosen by my female companion. I'm just a layman about this kind of thing. It looks good, but I don't know much about it. Edgar opened his mouth in surprise. He glanced at the female companion beside this gentleman, and then looked at the time again. Then he smiled. It's almost time. There should be no guests coming. Please come with me. Although he said so, at this time a black Bentley Mulsanne without a license plate slowly drove in and finally stopped. Edgar said apologetically, So there are guests. Would you please wait for a moment? It doesn't matter. Boss Luo, who didn't lack patience, said slowly. At this time a man got off the car. He had a huge body and wore a black bat eye patch. In addition, he had fake steps, red with a brandy nose. This man tidied up his clothes. Seeing Edgar coming over, he said neither slowly nor hurriedly, Has the auction started? Not yet, sir. Edgar said politely. This man said indifferently, Then take me in. I don't like to stand under the sun. While saying, this huge man glanced at the carriage that stopped next to him, revealing a surprised look. He shook his head and sneered. Does this Typica family really invite all kinds of strange people? Retro. These two are Mr. Yuri's distinguished guests. Edgar smiled and said, Since this gentleman is already impatient, why don't you follow me in as well?" This sentence was very skillful. At least this huge man felt a burst of awkwardness at this moment. It sounded like there was no problem, but thinking about it carefully, it actually meant, "I'm here to guide them. Since you happen to be here, please come with me," or something like that. "Humph!" The huge man snorted and said indifferently, "I hope these horses don't run around." Luaccio didn't say anything when he saw his master getting into the car. He quietly got into the carriage with Yui. They were indeed here to watch the auction. But the club owner never forgot that he had brought Miss Maid here as a tourist. "Actually, I wanted to ride this kind of carriage when I was in the ancient castle in the Sea of Flowers in Romania. After I saw the carriage owned by the family that sealed the Impaler Duke, I suddenly wanted to give it a try." "Master, do you want to try riding a carriage?" Therefore, Miss Maid remembered the words before renting the car. After entering the carriage, the coachman pulled the reins, and the carriage slowly drove into the manor. Luaccio suddenly looked at Yui and said, "How do you feel about that big fatty?" Yui said softly, he should be very uneasy or nervous, but I feel that he didn't realize it himself. Well, he has a strong sense of defense against the surrounding environment. He should be used to staying in a safe place for a long time. Once he enters a strange environment, he will be very uncomfortable. I think he should have a reason to go out. While saying this, Miss Maid suddenly took off the gauze hollow gloves on her hands, and a little black light appeared on her glittering fingertips. It was the size of a mosquito and flew out from the window of the carriage. Soon after, a loud explosion was heard from the back of the carriage. The black Bentley had a flat tire. Yugi was actually very stingy. Luaccio smiled. "Just play a trick on him. This fat man is the target of our guest. We shouldn't deprive our guest's right to enjoy himself." Miss Maid obediently put on her gloves slowly. In the end, the man who came in the Bentley had to take the car inside the manor. But what made him curious was that he seemed to be taken to a place that didn't seem to be used for auction. Of course, he didn't think he would be in danger here, because this manor didn't restrict him from bringing his subordinates. However, in such an empty room with only him and a few of his subordinates, as time passed, the atmosphere gradually made him impatient. "What's that sound?" "Boss, it seems to be a video phone." A subordinate walked to the wall of the room and turned on the TV hanging on the wall. A chair appeared on the screen, and a man was sitting on it, but his back was facing. "Are you Yuri of the Typica family?" the huge man said in a low voice. "Hello, Mr. Efim." His words revealed the truth. He then said, "Can you ask your subordinates to go outside first? I want to talk to you alone." "Of course, if you don't mind letting your subordinates hear something you don't want others to know, I won't mind. You guys go out first." Efim frowned, ignoring his subordinates' advice. Since the other party sent him the invitation, it indicated one thing: the owner of this manor must have something to say to him. So he was at least safe before that. He didn't think it would be safer to stay in his iron bucket-like building all the time. Some unknown threat factors were surrounding him. Therefore, he had no choice but to take the risk. "You've done so much just to lure me here, right?" Efim took a deep breath. He was in a bad mood now, as if he was walking step by step in the hole dug by the other party. Even the tire of his car just now was punctured. What bad luck! Mr. Efim is really a smart person. So I'll say it directly. I hope Mr. Efim can buy the painting in the auction later. What? Efim gave a start, subconsciously repeating, "You want me to buy the Nameless Maiden?" No, no, no. To be exact, you need to buy this fake, the Nameless Maiden. No matter how much money you need, you must buy it and pay it off on the spot. Oh, of course. Other guests probably won't know this painting is fake except you. Or, even if they have such doubts, they may not be able to prove it. Efim couldn't help sneering. Are you kidding me? How come? Because I think Mr. Efim must be willing to do so. After all, You don't want the whole world to know that you ask someone to pretend to be the F&C to transport the real painting from the gallery, right? What evidence do you have? FM said disdainfully. Evidence? The chair finally turned slowly. FM finally saw the real face of the man sitting in the chair and heard him say with a smile, I'm the evidence. Yuri, painter Yuri. FM's heart suddenly began to beat violently. It's you. FM couldn't believe it and even lost his voice. In the video, Yuri said with a playful look, Mr. FM, you're the most careful person I've ever met. For example, even Anna, the woman you think is very useful, you also have to check her every time before you see her, right? But who asked you to sleep with this woman? You shouldn't have let her go into your fortress. That bitch, sure enough, she betrayed me. FM snorted. He even directly took off the bat mask on his face, gnashing his teeth and angrily pointing at Yuri on the screen. Did you two conspire to deal with me from the beginning? Remember, no matter what, you have to buy the painting. Yuri said indifferently. That vagabond Yuri is just an ant to you. You can trample him to death at any time. But I'm not now. If you don't buy it, I can trample you to death. The screen turned black instantly. FM angrily swept all the things on the tea table to the ground. Boss, what's going on? Hearing the sound, the subordinate hurriedly pushed the door and walked in, only to see FM's terrifying eyes. Chapter 284. A room for rest couldn't accommodate all the guests. Of course, these guests didn't seem to be willing to share a room with too many others. Fortunately, this manor was spacious enough. It was definitely not a problem to prepare a room for each of these guests. Do you really want to do this? Vicar stretched out his hand, trying to pull Vera back, although he knew that the chance of success was almost zero. This was a woman who was born to take risks. Using a phrase he learned from an Eastern country's network when he was surfing the internet, she liked to seek death. Vera opened the door directly as if she didn't hear it. Vicar's throat was raised and he was very nervous. What's the matter? A man outside the door said indifferently, Miss, the auction hasn't started yet. If you need anything, you can tell me directly. Vera smiled slightly. She approached the gatekeeper, hooking her fingers on her collar and gently pulling it down. I seem to have been bitten by something here. Are there any strange insects in your manor? Can you help me take a look? Miss, we don't have such things in our manor. The man looked straight ahead. I think if you really have such needs, your companion in the room should be able to help you. Vera suddenly praised. You're really a good man. I'm beginning to like you. Well, it's all right. After that, Vera shrugged and turned back to the room. When the door was closed, the gatekeeper turned around indifferently, looking at the corridor outside the room. But in an instant he heard a slight cracking sound. But before he reacted, he felt that his neck seemed to be pierced by something. Just in the blink of an eye, he felt a burst of dizziness. Before he could even say a word, he had already blacked out and fell to the ground directly. Only then did the door fully open again. Vera quickly looked around, and then directly dragged him into the room. She clicked her tongue and said, A good man has to suffer losses. You don't take advantage of me. How can you blame me? The main reason is you don't have breasts at all. Vicar looked at the ceiling and didn't speak his mind. Don't be stunned. Come here and change into this man's clothes. Vera raised her head at this moment, looking at the absent-minded vicar, and said. Soon after, Vicar, who had changed into a man's clothes, stealthily pushed the door open, but was directly pushed by Vera from behind, stumbling out. At the same time, Vera, who had changed into a full set of close-fitting leather clothes, patted Vicar's shoulder. If the auction starts later, find a way to delay the time by yourself. Vicar immediately said with a crying face, Dear Miss Vera, do you think that the guards in this manor can't recognize me as an outsider when they see each other every day? That's your business. Vera pinched Vicar's cheeks with her hands and shook her head slightly. Vera, Why do I pay you so much salary? Isn't it better to have a few girlfriends than to have a guy like you who likes men's butts? You're discriminating. I want a raise. Be careful, Vera said softly. Then she took a deep breath and put on a clown mask. She opened the window of the corridor and jumped out instantly. Clown? In his room, Yuri frowned, looking at the scene in a corridor of the manor, and then looked at the guy sitting on the opposite sofa with a strange expression. He was also wearing a clown mask. Yuri didn't know the reason, but he found one thing during the period when he temporarily replaced the owner of this manor. There was a screen in the original owner's room, which could directly see every place in the manor. Yuri didn't even know how many hidden cameras were installed in this manor. The only thing he felt was that the original owner of this manor was the real heir of the Typica family or voyeur. Oh, this person, is she a real FNC? Yuri frowned. So it's a woman? How did she come here? FNC was inexplicably framed and became the thief of the world-famous painting. Isn't it normal that they wouldn't act as if nothing had happened? Luo Chio said indifferently. Yuri ground his teeth. He suddenly narrowed his eyes and stared at the man in front of him who gave him everything and took everything away from him. He said darkly, I've prepared a good show for you to watch. I don't want anyone to ruin it. Do you want to deal with her? Boss, Luo asked suddenly. Is there a problem? Yuri said indifferently. Luocho smiled. No problem, but how about leaving it to me? I'll try not to let her ruin the things you've prepared. Oh, is the mysterious boss of the club interested in Ms. Clown? Yuri asked indifferently. Miss Maid suddenly said indifferently. Mr. Yuri, do you think we can only serve you? Don't forget, we've already given you what you want. Her eyes turned cold, and she said slowly, and now I'm afraid we're your creditors. You can do whatever you want. Yuri shook his head. He instinctively didn't dare to look at them. So he stood up and said hurriedly, I'm going to prepare. Please help yourselves. How's the situation on your side? Vera, who had been sneaking in the manor, lowered her head and pulled up a small microphone clipped to her clothes. Fortunately, no one comes here for the time being. How's the situation on your side? No problem. I've already memorized the route here last time. Vera said briskly, keep in touch. She turned off the communication and agilely climbed to the top of the arch of the corridor, avoiding a manor maid who was passing by with something in her hands. This was a very good experience. Every time she faced such an environment and walked alone in a dangerous place, the nervousness brought by the heartbeat and the sense of crisis, as well as the excitement caused by the adrenaline stimulation, made her feel fascinated and almost unable to extricate herself. If someone had to become a thief because of his addiction to theft, then she probably had the same reason. But Vera didn't continue to turn over herself here. Every cell in her body seemed to be urging her to act as soon as possible. The stuffy feeling in the headgear made her feel as if she was sweating profusely at the onset of a climax. It was wonderful. Based on her memory, she quickly walked around the manor. She walked and then stopped. She had to stop because she felt that her route seemed to be wrong. The scene in front of her seemed to be different from her memory. She shouldn't have come to this place. What exactly went wrong? Vera couldn't help but carefully recall the route she had just taken. But no matter how hard she tried, it seemed that she couldn't find the wrong place. This made her feel that something was wrong all of a sudden. Vera subconsciously let her body stick to the wall. She didn't choose to act immediately, but carefully looked around. This was the outer corridor of the second floor of the manor, close to the ground. The circular design allowed people to see the central courtyard from the corridor, but there was no one walking around the corridor. Suddenly, a feeling of falling backward appeared, which made Vera's body sink into the wall. Did she sink into the wall? At the moment when she was about to fall, she supported herself with both hands on the ground and then exerted force to straighten her body. But she found that she didn't fall into the wall, but just at the moment when the door opened. Wait, she just leaned against the door, not the wall? Clap, clap, clap. but soon she heard a few simple claps and a voice saying, "You're very good." Vera abruptly turned around. She knelt on the ground with one knee, one hand on the floor, and the other hand raised. This was the posture after falling down to straighten her body. "Well, this is also very handsome." "It's you." But she couldn't help but let out a low voice almost instinctively. This was the strange person she met in the last auction. Chapter 285. Vera started to look around the room, carefully. Because it was daytime, the lighting was good, and she could even see every detail of the room. But at this time, she heard the voice of the mysterious guy in front of her. "Miss Vera, the lawn is behind the window on the left, and the road is behind. Now there's no one, so it should be the best time to leave the manor." "I don't know what you are talking about. Vera? Who is Vera?" The voice from the clown mask was calm and steady, because it was made by the voice changer in the mask, just like that night. Today, this mysterious fellow had directly seen through her identity. Therefore, she didn't let her body incline to the left for convenience, but slightly to the right. "The place where the dogs are kept is on the right side of the manor. It seems that Miss Vera thinks I am lying to you?" The club boss shook his head. "I don't need to lie to you." "That's funny. Will anyone believe the words of an unknown person?" "That's right." Luaccio nodded. "For Miss Vera, we don't trust each other at present. How about this? I don't want to have any accidents in this auction, so I want to ask Miss Vera to leave here or go back to your original place and participate in the activity as a guest. Since you said that we don't trust each other." Vera sneered. She walked casually in the room, to the right side, and said, "Why do I need to satisfy your wish? Besides, why do you want to ensure that this auction will go on normally? What is the relationship between you and the owner of this manor? What exactly do you want to do?" "Sorry, I can't tell you about this." Luaccio said indifferently, "Miss Vera, just think of it as some after-sale service. So, I hope Miss Vera won't bring me trouble." "Oh, really? But for me, ever since I was young, I've always given people the impression that I'm trouble. So, I'm sorry." Vera's tone suddenly sped up, and her body began to sprint toward the window on the right. Her legs kicked hard, and then her body rushed to the window. Her hands quickly pushed the window open, and then she turned over and jumped out. Her posture was as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water, like a diver jumping off a high platform. Luaccio shook his head, looking at the servant girl, and asked curiously, "I was just about to ask her to run to the right. Do you think she will run to the left?" Yi smiled slightly. "I think this lady is not in the mood to think about this kind of thing." Luaccio walked to the window, looking down, and whispered, "I think so. Damn it, bastard, damn it." Vera had no choice but to repeat the malicious abuse in her heart over and over again. How could this be? She had clearly chosen the right side and landed perfectly. Both of these actions should have allowed her to leave easily. But why was it like this? Why was this place really a place where wolfhounds were kept? And it wasn't just one, but 8 huge wolfhounds. Front and back, left and right. She was obviously surrounded by these well-trained big guys. The inside of the hood, which was already stuffy, began to become even more moist. Facing 8 dogs, Vera couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Maybe dealing with these dogs at the same time was not a suicidal act, but it would definitely expose her behavior. She had no choice but to raise her head and look at the window on the second floor that she had pushed open. She looked at the hateful guy, who looked like he was watching a show, and shrugged. "I think we should fix the relationship of mistrust between the two sides. Let's go back," Luocchio said softly. The 8 ferocious wolf dogs immediately turned around and ran away like domestic cats without barking. Vera subconsciously asked, "Are you the circus's beast tamer?" "Boss," Luo suddenly said, "the auction is about to start. If Miss Vera doesn't want to leave, can you join me?" "I don't seem to have a choice." Vera shrugged. She directly untied the hood on her face, fanning the wind, and said, "How do you know my identity?" I think, if I don't know this, Luaccio said softly, we are not qualified to say that we can serve Miss Vera. Let's go. I think Miss Vera needs to change back to your original clothes before joining the auction. At the same time, the window on the second floor suddenly opened. At the moment when the window opened, Vera saw Vicar. Her assistant was surprised. You're back? So fast? Looking at Vicar's surprised expression, Vera subconsciously looked up. The window had been closed. What happened? The route she memorized a day ago seemed to be completely messed up. After going around in circles, she actually returned to the original starting point? Is there anything upstairs? Vicar poked his head out and looked upstairs at the same time. Vera took a deep breath and said, Go back to the room and change your clothes. Let's go to the auction. So, what's the meaning of going out? Vicar's face was full of confusion, but Vera had quickly climbed through the window, then walked into the room and quickly changed her original clothes. Vera pulled the zipper at the back of her skirt while looking at herself in the mirror. The route she took in the manor when she left the room appeared in her mind again. She believed that she had a good memory. Even though the manor was huge, she still had the confidence to reconstruct the composition in her mind. Suddenly, Vera pressed her hands on the basin, and her eyes approached the mirror. Her eyes suddenly changed, turning into blue, cone-shaped pupils. I didn't go wrong, but why is there such a huge difference between the real scene and the composition? It was too mysterious, as if it was an unsolvable puzzle. Oh, God, as a magician, Vera swore that she must unravel the mystery. Vera's body suddenly seemed to be extremely tired, almost lying on the basin. She took a deep breath and washed her face. She wanted to calm down. She knew that she overused her brain power, so she had to stop this intense brain power. But at this time there was an inexplicable idea in her mind. That guy is more like a magician than me. It was similar to a tea party in this palace-like room. Sorry to keep you waiting for a long time. Yuri had exposed his appearance in the hotel last time, but at the beginning of today he also wore a half mask to cover his face. But no one paid attention to his action. This was because, as Yuri walked in, two men behind him were moving an object that was covered with a white cloth. Today's theme, what was this thing? It was obvious. I believe that everyone must be wondering why I have a copy of The Nameless Maiden in my hand. Yuri glanced at the people present. He saw the boss of the club sitting quietly in the corner. But there were two more people beside Luaccio. But he didn't care about these. The time he had didn't allow him to think about these things. At the moment when the white cloth was lifted, the scene almost made the same low exclamation. Unbelievable. An old man gathered in front of this painting at this time. He held a small magnifying glass in his hand, and now he was immersed in observing. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that someone was guarding this image, he would have reached out to touch its texture. Everything can be faked, but this technique can't fool people. This is indeed Ivan Nikolaevich. It's true that this is Ivan Nikolaevich's authentic work. I've been chasing his works for almost half a world. I can't be wrong. This is the real The Nameless Maiden. Then the one in the hotel last time, wasn't it obtained by F&C? Why did it appear in Tipica's house? Is F&C a member of Tipica's family? But who exactly was the person in the hotel that night? I'm more concerned about the price of this painting. Don't talk nonsense. We're here for this painting today. As long as it's real, I'm willing to pay any price. Edgar found the atmosphere was almost there, so he stood up and said slowly, You know, this painting is priceless. So there's no final conclusion about its value. So we don't intend to set a price for it. The auction will officially start after the first guest bids. Mr. Butler smiled and said, Of course, the one who can suppress everyone will become the new owner of this heirloom treasure. So, everyone, what are you waiting for? I'll bid 1 million. In an instant, a slightly plump guest sitting near the center of the table called out the price. However, when he saw that almost everyone was looking at him, he could only add, Euros, This gentleman bid 1 million euros. Edgar nodded and said indifferently, first time. No need to bother. Suddenly, in another corner, a huge man stood up and said in a low voice, 250 million euros. Whoever wants a painting with a higher price can take it. Chapter 286. 250 million. Crazy. How can you bid like this? Don't you know, even so far, the highest price in the world is Picasso's painting, which can reach more than 100 million. And it's only in US dollars. This was 2 times higher than the most expensive auction in the world. Some people couldn't accept this price at all, and a few people kept silent as if they were hesitating. When Edgar was about to shout for the 3rd time, suddenly someone gritted his teeth and said firmly, 251 million euros. 260 million euros. FM said slowly with an unimaginably calm tone, which almost crossed his bottom line. Why did he need to take out such a huge fortune? He should have been the one who got the money, but now he had to pay the bill. More importantly, he clearly knew that the painting was fake, and what was worse, the real one had already been in his hands. You win. I hope you're really going to collect it. You can't sell it at this price. Don't forget that this thing can't be exposed to the white light. The man snorted, but FM, who only wanted to end the battle quickly, didn't want to argue with him, but stood up. Edgar had finished the last sentence. 260 million euros, the 3rd time sold. Hearing the word sold, FM felt heartache, but he also felt relieved unexpectedly. Sir, our rule here is to pay first and then take the goods. Edgar said slowly, of course, please rest assured. After all, in front of so many guests, our Typica family won't do something that will damage our reputation. I hope so. FM snorted. Don't write a check. Just transfer the money by electronic bank. Saying this, he took out a network key from his inner pocket. Buying a painting that he knew was fake for 260 million euros. He felt that he must be crazy. The money has been transferred. Edgar walked to Yuri at this time and whispered to him. Yuri nodded at this time, directly lifting the painting and walking to FM, handing it to him. Take it. If you drop it, there won't be a second one. You don't need to remind me. FM snorted. But at this time, Yuri suddenly stretched out his hand and quickly took off the bat mask on FM's face. What are you doing? FM was shocked, quickly stepping back. Yuri just squinted his eyes and said calmly, Nothing. I just want to let all guests know who got this heirloom treasure and congratulate him. Congratulation. Yuri stretched out his hand. You... FM's face suddenly turned ugly, because he clearly heard some voices of discussion. The guests' voices. Isn't this FM? The nouveau riche from the mining area. Obviously, some of the guests had recognized him. FM knew that before today, the whole underground world of Moscow would know that the nameless maiden was in his hands. But he didn't intend to make trouble here. He grabbed Yuri's palm expressionlessly, but he was unusually forceful. He lowered his voice like a cornered beast. I've already bought the painting. What other tricks do you want to play? Tricks? Yuri shook his head and laughed. There's no trick. I just want Mr. FM to get this painting. Not the FNC that can be casually impersonated. You've got guts. FM put on a fake smile and then lifted the painting, turning to look at his subordinates, gritting his teeth. Let's go! FM directly pushed open the door of the room with his men. Although the rest of the guests felt a weird atmosphere, few people were willing to intervene if it was a problem between FM, the nouveau riche of the Lost Patskaya mining area, and the Typica family, the lunatics who smuggled arms. Everyone, I've asked people to prepare some delicious food and wine. Although the painting has been bought, but... Yuri smiled and said, Let's finish the ball a few days ago. But in fact, not many people intended to stay. Those who stayed might just want to get to know the Typica family. After all, it was better to have one more friend than one more stranger. Society, be it in the open or in the dark, was all about connections. 260 million euros, tut-tut. Vera, who had watched the whole process of the auction, now tidied up her skirt and said calmly, "Such a sky-high price, no wonder you don't want to let anything happen to this auction." If she had known that this price would be reached, even if it was her, she wouldn't have let any accidents happen at the auction. She didn't have a particularly strong desire for money, but she also admitted that money was a good thing, and no one would dislike having too little of it. Those who said that money was no longer money once it reached a certain level, but was just a simple number, and that it was enough as long as it was enough to eat and wear. People who said such words were just fooling the common people. Let these people go to the slums and suffer some hardships. From luxury to simplicity, they would swallow all their words. "Miss Vera, are you going to stay for the following banquet?" Boss Luo didn't answer, and even skipped such a topic. "No, I don't like to stay with a guy who pretends to be mysterious." Vera said indifferently, "Now I didn't destroy your auction, so I'll leave." That was what she said, and what she did. Then she directly pulled Vicar away. But until she felt that she had completely left this person's line of sight, Vera had a feeling of fear, as if the person behind her was a python that could devour people. Unconsciously, she was already wet. Finally, after getting into the car, Vera suddenly clutched her chest and gasped for air as if she was having an asthma attack. "Vera, you—" Vicar suddenly became anxious and quickly took out a small bottle from the storage box of the co-pilot seat and poured out some small pills. "Don't eat too much." Vera pushed Vicar's hand away, trying to endure the uncomfortable things in her body. "I just used my brain today. I'll be fine after a rest. Hurry up before it gets dark. The moon will be very round tonight." In the basement of the manor, Victor and Yelgo were trapped in the basement. Yelgo was thinking hard about how to get out of this bad environment. At this time, the door of the basement was opened again. But this time, the people who opened the door didn't send food, and there was more than one. They walked to Victor's side, untied him, and held him down at the same time. Victor frowned and said in a low voice, "Where are you going to take me? And do you know what you are doing? You are openly challenging the police of Moscow." But they were like mutes and didn't intend to respond to Victor. They just violently took him away from this place. So Victor was taken all the way to the current owner of the manor and was forced to sit at one end of a long table. The person sitting at the other end, who was cutting the steak on the plate, was Yuri. "Relax, Mr. Policeman." Yuri bit a small piece of beef, drank a mouthful of wine, and smiled. "I don't intend to hurt you." "Really? Restraining a policeman for more than 48 hours. You are breaking the law." Victor sneered. Although his current situation was bad, he was brought here. Here was the dining table, which meant that what would happen next might be something that could be solved through negotiation. He had to toughen himself up so that he could have a better grasp of the next conversation. Breaking the law? Yuri shook his head. He clasped his hands and said with a pious look, "Mr. Victor, you misunderstood me. I think I will be a good citizen. As for why, naturally it is because I will provide clues to find the nameless maiden." "What?" Victor frowned. He suddenly couldn't figure out what this guy's plan was. Yuri suddenly clapped his hands at this time. His butler, Edgar, who had been standing beside him, turned away lightly and turned on the projector in the living room. "Look, there are some interesting things here." Yuri smiled. Victor patiently watched what was being played on the projector. First, he heard an angry voice. "What? You want me to take a picture of this painting? That bitch really betrayed me." The scene suddenly changed. In a room where many people were wearing masks, it was still the man with the bat mask. His voice. 250 million euros. Whoever wants a painting with a higher price can take it. Until the last scene, when the man with the bat mask was unveiled and his true face was finally revealed, it was extremely clear. "This is FM?" Victor couldn't help but frown. The reason why he could recognize FM was not only because he was a rich businessman, but more importantly, his identity was also a politician. What do you want to do? I give these to you, and you help me to ruin FM's reputation. At the same time, you can also find the stolen painting. It's a great contribution." Victor sneered. "You want to use my hand to help you eradicate FM? You think I should wallow in the mire with you? I help you just to catch a bastard, and then let another bastard come out. In that case, I'm afraid, Mr. Victor, even your partner can't get out of this manner." Yuri said with a little pity, "Oh, by the way, Mr. Victor, do you have a family? Parents, wife, and children?" Bang! Victor angrily slammed his hands on the table and suddenly stood up, but was immediately pressed down by the two men behind him. He couldn't help gnashing his teeth. "You're a bastard!" Chapter 287. "Mr. Victor, don't you need our people to send you back? You know, it's a long way from here to downtown." In front of the manor, Edgar looked at Victor and asked, "No, I'll be suffocated if I stay with you for one more minute." Victor gritted his teeth. He had been very discontented since he walked out of that room. He didn't even want to be nice to everyone in this manor, because he had to accept the condition of the manor owner. Edgar seemed to be used to this kind of scene, so he didn't show any dissatisfaction on his face. He smiled and said, "Mr. Victor, please rest assured. We'll take good care of Mr. Yelgo when you're not here." Victor didn't say anything. He just turned around silently and walked to the road leading to downtown. It seemed to be the only way to go. "Sir, Sheriff Victor has gone back." When Edgar returned to the manor, Yuri was sitting alone on the sofa in the study with his eyes closed. At this time, he slightly nodded and suddenly asked, "By the way, where are my two guests?" "Two guests?" Edgar was stunned for a moment and asked curiously, "Sir, who are the two guests you're talking about?" Yuri slowly opened his eyes and glanced at Edgar's expression. There was only doubt on the old man's face. Did he forget again? It was just like when he woke up in this manor for the first time. Those two people, the man and the woman, seemed to not exist. But in the whole manor, only Yuri himself knew that this time he seemed to be controlled by the man and the woman. "Nothing. I may have remembered something wrong." Yuri shook his head and took a deep breath. "Go and ask Miss Anna to come here." "Yes, sir." Anna was taken to the door of the room. Edgar just made a gesture of please at this time. He didn't open the door for Anna, but just stood there. Anna frowned, seeming to want to let her go in by herself. She hesitated for a moment, then calmly pushed the door and entered. Yuri was sitting on the sofa, seemingly for some time. Did he fall asleep? Anna closed the door. Since Yuri invited her to accompany him to paint last time, they didn't have any contact during this time. Although she knew that Yuri lived in this place, Anna narrowed her eyes and subconsciously made her footsteps as light as a house cat as she slowly approached. All of a sudden, Yuri raised his head and opened his eyes as if he had just woken up from a dream. "Are they here?" "Sorry, I'm a little tired, so I took a nap." "Nothing." Anna stopped in her tracks. She turned her eyes and smiled. "I saw the guests' cars leaving the manor. It seems that your auction has been a success. Congratulations. Not only did you sell this painting, but you also disrupted FM's previous auction so that he didn't get anything. Next, as long as you spread the news that this painting has been sold, the real painting in FM's hand will be even more shady and difficult to sell." I think he must have been so angry that he directly smashed the cup. "Anna." Yuri suddenly shouted this name. "What's the matter?" Anna walked along the waveguide on the floor of the room. She came to the sofa and sat opposite to Yuri. "Do you know the transaction price of this auction?" Yuri asked indifferently. "I think you will tell me." Anna looked at Yuri with her charming eyes. Yuri looked at it appreciatively and said softly, 260 million euros. Anna almost felt that her breath had stopped for a moment. Although she had tried to assume the success of the auction and overestimated the guests' enthusiasm as much as possible, she never thought that it would be such a sky-high price. More importantly, she remembered what Yuri had said to her. All the proceeds from the auction of this painting would belong to her. Yuri, you're really a genius. But as smart as she was, she didn't intend to continue the topic of 260 million euros. She needed to test what kind of attitude Yuri had. She hadn't been able to figure out what kind of attitude Yuri had. You really did it. You completely imitated Ivan's painting. You're simply a living Ivan. Nikolaevich, Anna said excitedly. Yuri heaved a sigh of relief and suddenly asked, Anna, do you still remember how we met? Of course, how could I forget? Anna said in a reminiscing voice, that moving voice. At that time, I had just walked out of the art gallery. Maybe it was God's will. I didn't take the usual road, but chose another one. I met you on that road. She looked at Yuri with blurred eyes. At that time you were eating bread. You sat on the ground, and there was a drawing board on the stool. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew one of your papers out, and it came to me. Maybe God wants to bring your painting to my side, and also to bring you to my side. But when we were on the platform, you ruthlessly drove me away from you forever and ever. Yuri narrowed his eyes. Anna shook her head, and there seemed to be a trace of pain on her face. She didn't intend to refute, but just looked at Yuri with complex eyes. Her eyes were like a whirlpool, as if there are thousands of words that couldn't be said in detail. Finally, she just said in a low voice, I'm sorry. Here's 10 million. But in the next moment, Yuri took out a check from his pocket and pushed it on the table in front of Anna. He said indifferently, You attacked me at the station, and I lied to you this time. Let's call it even. 260 million. I can't give you that. Looking at the change of expression on Anna's face, Yuri shook his head, stood up and walked towards the door, saying while walking, Where do you want to go? Just tell my steward, and the driver will send you away. Oh, by the way, at the moment when the door was opened, Yuri turned back. You shouldn't study oil painting appraisal. I think it's more suitable for you to study acting. Anna sat there, motionless. She slowly retracted her angry gaze, took a deep breath, and said, Is that so? I'll think about it. Then goodbye. Yuri closed the door. There were painful cries, smashing sounds, and the sound of something hanging on the wall and floor. Outside the room, Vicar was holding a glass of vodka with both hands. His body kept trembling, and the drink in the glass kept shaking, although it was not the first time for him to experience this, but every time he would feel fear from the bottom of his heart. Vai, Vera, or you take some more medicine. Vicar quickly walked to the door of the room, saying loudly through the door, Go away. The roaring sound burst in Vicar's ears, and he stepped back instinctively, but he always felt too dangerous and scared, so he held the cushion in his arms with one hand and picked up the fruit knife on the table with the other, pointing at the room nervously. He swallowed his saliva. Vai, Vera, for the sake of so many years, if you can't stand it and want to rush out, remember to tell me before you rush out. Roar! The inhuman roar suddenly sounded, and Vicar was so scared that he sat down on the ground. But after this sound, there seemed to be no movement in the room. Vicar swallowed his saliva, thinking that he'd better wait for a while. In the room, Vera had already collapsed on the ground. The light was not turned on, and even the curtains were closed, making the room completely dark. But at this time, the table lamp in the room suddenly lit up. The orange light shone out, showing the figure lying on the ground completely. She was Vera. She fell to the ground. Her body curled up, and there was not a single piece of clothing on her. She seemed to have fainted. Round beads of sweat were hanging on the thick hair on her body, like a cat that accidentally fell into the water and got wet. And the silver wet hair was gradually disappearing from Vera's arms, thighs, abdomen, and even her face, or it was shrinking back. As for the club boss who turned on the table lamp for this room, now he and Miss Maid carefully observed the slowly shrinking furry tail that came out from Vera's back. Yu Yi said that this was a wolf's tail. Chapter 288. Finally, the furry tail disappeared from Vera's body. This seemed to be the final sign. Except for her hair and eyebrows, there was no extra hair on her body. Her whole body had become unusually smooth. Vera curled up on the cold floor. In fact, the floor was already wet with her sweat. Luaccio looked at the room at this time. There were many crisscrossing cracks on the walls and the floor. Some of them were even as dense as a fishing net. Is this a werewolf? Luaccio, who saw this kind of thing for the first time, was very interested. Just like the first time he met a monster, he also had a curious expression. When he was still in the manor, Luaccio felt a little strange. That was when Vera went out of the window and met the wolfhounds in the manor. Although these wolfhounds did surround Vera, they didn't bark from beginning to end. Instead, they bared their teeth and tightened their bodies as if they were facing a formidable enemy. As for Vera's compromise with him later, it was not so much out of fear, but the feeling of it was better this way. As for after the auction, although she was calm, Boss Luo had seen a lot of people recently. He also saw a hint of anxiety in the eyes of this handsome magician, and a touch of whiteness on her lips. Miss Maid crossed her arms and thought for a moment. Vera? Taktakanov. Although there are many people who use this surname in Russia, looking at the change of Miss Vera just now, I think there is only one family. Yu Yi looked at Luaccio and whispered, Master, I think Miss Vera should be the princess of the Taktakanov family, the biggest mafia in Russia. Luaccio walked back and forth in the room, walking around Vera on the ground, then looked up. A werewolf family? It's a very old family, but there are very few werewolves in existence. Basically, they are scattered all over the world. Miss Vera's family is one of a kind. Yu Yi whispered. The Taktakanov family belongs to the descendants of the ancient Turkic people. In ancient times, they worshipped the wolf totem. Although she only had a history of 300 years as a maid, Luaccio always felt that Yu Yi was like a living dictionary. Luaccio felt that Miss Maid had a good attribute, so he was in a good mood. He nodded and said, The guy outside just now said that she needs to take some medicine. Maybe she will feel better. Maybe. Can the werewolf transformation be controlled by medicine? Yu Yi thought for a moment and said, No, an adult pure-blood werewolf can control their transformation even when there is a full moon. Although their temper will become very irritable when there is a full moon, and they can easily lose control because of some small things, at least they can barely maintain their transformation. Yu Yi looked at Vera on the ground and said indifferently, But she seems to be in too much pain. I think there might be some problems in her bloodline, and the so-called medicine should be to help her suppress the transformation of the night. But I'm afraid that the medicine has a lot of side effects, so she would rather suffer a little and endure it by herself than to eat too much. But Yu Yi pondered for a moment, stretched out her finger, and touched Vera's forehead lightly, then said slowly, I'm afraid she can't hold on much longer. This body is about to reach its limit, and it will probably collapse soon. Luaccio nodded and then waved his hand to let Vera, who was curled up on the ground, float up and slowly land on the bed, pulling the quilt over her. Her body, which had returned to its original appearance, was covered just like that. Luaccio stretched out his hand again, and the remote control of the air conditioner that was smashed by Vera when she went crazy flew into his hand. After turning on the air conditioner and setting it to automatic mode, Luaccio looked at Yu Yi and smiled. Is there any place suitable for taking a walk at night? Is the riverside okay? Luoccio smiled and followed her advice. Before leaving, Boss Luo gently put a black card beside Vera's pillow. As Anna once said to Yuri, Efim was smashing cups in his fortress. Many cups and glass fragments were scattered all over the ground. The door of the elevator suddenly opened. Looking at the glass fragments on the ground, his subordinate nervously walked to Demon Efim's side. Boss, Miss Anna is back. Anna. Efim turned back. With his hands on his waist, he didn't look approachable. Really let her come up. When the elevator door opened, Anna first looked around the elevator door as usual. She found that there weren't two people to scan her as usual, but she still walked in. The glass fragments on the ground alarmed her. looking at FM, who stood in front of the glass curtain, silently with a glass in his hand. Anna frowned. What happened? You actually came back? FM said indifferently. You're really brave. Anna said discontentedly. I was caught by the Typica family and finally found a chance to escape. What do you mean? You blame me for the accident in your auction? Escape? FM sneered. Then tell me, how did you escape? Anna said indifferently. FM, it's not important. What's important is that I found something. That day, I didn't kill Yuri on the platform, and he even inexplicably became a member of the Typica family. He destroyed the painting in the hotel that day, and then sold a new painting himself. Do you know how much he sold? How much? FM rolled his eyes, asking curiously. Anna sighed, rubbing her brows. 260 million euros. How could there be such an idiot buying a fake painting with 260 million euros? I have to admit that Yuri is indeed a genius in counterfeiting. FM, we should think about how to recover the loss now. I know you're angry, but it's not the time to be angry. FM nodded. I admit it. Oh, I want to show you something. Come with me. Anna was stunned and followed FM to the back of the screen in the room, to the front of an easel. This time, FM lifted the white cloth on the easel by himself. The nameless maiden. Anna frowned. Why did you take out the real one? Do you have any plans? No, this is also a fake one. FM looked at Anna, saying slowly, How could it be? Shouldn't the fake one have been destroyed in the hotel? But Anna immediately stopped talking. She seemed to have realized something, but it seemed to be too late, because at this moment, FM suddenly attacked, grabbing Anna's hair with one hand, pulling her body to the wall, and reaching out to strangle her neck. Looking at Anna's frightened expression, he put his face close to hers, sneering. Why is it impossible? Why is it impossible? That's because the person you're talking about who spent 260 million euros to buy the fake goods is me. Anna grasped FM's arm painfully. Although this man was fat, he had terrifying physical strength. His huge body pressed her body against the wall, making her unable to move. Her neck had been strangled. She could only feel difficulty in breathing and couldn't speak. FM looked at Anna with a ferocious face, opening his mouth, as if to swallow her. I don't know why Yuri became a member of the Typica family, and I don't want to know now. And I don't want to know what your plan is, so I dare to come back here. However, I can honestly tell you that you're dead meat. How dare you betray me? Moreover, he and that Yuri even stole 260 million from me. You even exposed me in front of everyone. Anna patted the wall painfully. The decreasing oxygen was begging in her body. She felt that her sight began to dim slowly, and the laryngeal bone in her neck seemed to be crushed at any time. She recalled the conversation she had with Yuri before she left the manor. He didn't tell her that the person who bought the painting was FM. He even said to her, so goodbye. It turned out to be this goodbye. Boss? What's the matter? FM sat quietly and took a sip of wine, but he didn't say anything. He just pointed at the corner of the wall there. Anna had fallen to the ground, motionless, and her body had even turned cold. Boss, I see, I'll deal with her. The subordinate nodded. Suddenly a phone call was made. Chapter 289. What FM was most worried about happened, and it happened on the same day. He suddenly had a feeling that he was caught in a big net woven for him. Ever since his identity had been exposed in the manor, he had felt uneasy. And at this moment, when a police car came downstairs, this feeling reached its peak in an instant. Did he say, "What's the matter?" No. The man said quickly he just showed his ID and showed his identity, saying that he has something important to see you. But I think he's in a hurry. FM pondered for a while, nodding. Let him wait for me downstairs. I'll come down after I change my clothes. Understood. The man nodded. He had a lot of things to do, not only to greet the sheriff downstairs, but also to clean up this room and some things that didn't belong here. Ha ha ha, sorry, I'm taking a shower, because I'm used to going to bed after 10 o'clock. Sorry to keep you waiting. FM, who had changed his clothes, came downstairs at this time. He looked at the sheriff in front of him. The man said that he had verified his ID, so there was no problem with his identity. "Hello, Mr. FM. I'm Victor. Sorry to bother you so late at night." Victor nodded, suddenly approaching FM. But the bodyguard beside FM reached out to stop him, saying indifferently, "Mr. Victor, take your time." Victor said calmly, "Mr. FM, can I talk to you alone? I don't think you'll refuse me." "Really?" FM said indifferently. "If I tell your boss that a reckless guy came to my house in the middle of the night to harass me, I don't think he'll refuse my complaint." Victor smiled, lowering his voice. "I heard that Mr. FM bought something extraordinary today, right?" In an instant, FM narrowed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand, saying, "You go out first. I have something to talk with Mr. Victor." Seeing that the man had left, leaving only him and Victor in the room, FM slowly sat down, saying calmly, "What did Sheriff Victor say just now?" "I didn't seem to listen carefully." Victor showed a smile at this time, coming to FM again, but he took out his phone and put it on the table in front of FM. "I think Mr. FM will be very interested in the content of this film." "Oh, really?" FM picked up the phone casually and played it. His face turned ugly as the movie played. He didn't even finish watching the movie before he stopped watching it. He put down his phone and looked up at Victor, who was standing with his hands clasped. His fingers were slowly tapping on the armrest. For a long time, FM suddenly asked, "What do you want?" Victor said slowly, "This was sent by one of my men. I guess he wants to make a contribution. After all, this film clearly points out that the stolen painting was bought by you, Mr. FM. Because of what happened today, we have reason to believe that the painting is still in your hands. However, I intercepted it with me. Currently, other than me, no one else knows about it." FM said indifferently, "Isn't it good if you hand it in all the way? That's a great contribution, isn't it?" Victor shrugged and said, "I don't know if Mr. FM knows how much the annual salary of a regular agent such as me is. And with my current position, if I were to be promoted, how much annual salary would I be able to get? What about the director? How much is it?" FM said calmly, "Do you know that I've known your director for a long time?" Victor smiled. "A big businessman like you, Mr. FM, naturally knows a lot of people. However, because a video of a mafia boss was uploaded to VK earlier, a lot of things were involved. I think most of the people in Moscow will be separated temporarily in the future. Mr. FM, do you know how many years I've been in this field? 23 years. I even received the Neva King Alexander Medal awarded by the president himself." Victor said confidently, "I believe my words have some effect, and even our boss may not be able to let me pack up and leave my current position immediately." FM said indifferently, "It's good to be confident. In addition, I admire your courage to come to me alone. Not bad, not bad. I like to cooperate with people with courage. I'll buy this film. Give me a price you like." Victor said, "Mr. FM, do you think it's okay to just buy this film? What do you want to say?" Victor said, "I don't believe that a newbie under me who just graduated not long ago can get his hands on this video. Mr. FM, have you offended anyone recently?" FM patted his palm on the armrest and stood up. "Mr. Victor, thank you for bringing me this news. But I'm a businessman. I like a straightforward way of talking." Victor said indifferently, "Our director is not clean. He may step down at any time. I think Mr. FM will need a more stable and younger partner. Is this your purpose?" FM squinted. "I've received the Neva King Alexander Medal, but I can only stay in a small office. Don't you think it's a pity, Mr. FM?" Victor approached FM and whispered, "Someone wants to deal with Mr. FM. I think Mr. FM also needs more helpers, don't you?" "Why should I believe you?" FM sneered. Victor shrugged. "Time will prove it to me. Our boss's situation is not good recently. Maybe it won't be long. In short, I know this film will only be in my hands. However, I think the person who leaked it may do something if he doesn't hear anything from us. This is my business card. Mr. FM can contact me if you need. Watching Victor take back the phone and walk towards the door, FM suddenly said when he was about to open the door, "Wait." "Anything else?" FM took out a checkbook from his clothes, signed his name, and tore off a blank check. "Write a number that you think is nice. I can't let you feel that you've come here for nothing." Victor reached out and held the check, waving his hand. "Then I'm looking forward to your call, Mr. FM. Boss, what did that stinky policeman say?" The man who had become Victor's confidant several years ago came back, looking at FM, who was meditating. FM said it briefly, and the confidant frowned. "Boss, it seems that the Typica family wants to deal with you on purpose?" However, they didn't expect that they would be stuck when it came to Victor. This guy was also an ambitious person. It seems that he wants both money and power. But FM suddenly said, "Do you think Victor has no problem?" The confidant thought for a while and said, "But he has no reason to come to you directly with such important evidence, which is a serious violation of the Army's record. If he feels that this is a chance to make a meteoric rise, I think he may take the risk. In my opinion, it's a pity that a person who can get the Alexander of Neva medal is still working in a small inspector's office." FM was silent for a while and suddenly said, "Have the things been cleaned up?" "The garbage has been loaded and taken away by the garbage truck." The confidant looked at the time on his wrist and said indifferently, "It should be burned soon." FM nodded and then said slowly, "Book me a ticket to Italy for the next week. I want all the time slots." At 9:05, Miss Anna entered the building. At 9:19, Victor also came to FM's building. At 9:30, someone threw a big black bag onto the garbage truck. At 9:50, Victor left the building. At 11:40, Miss Anna still hasn't appeared. "Boss, I think the big bag on the garbage truck should be—" Yuri waved his hand to stop the man sitting next to the driver. He just opened the window of the car, watching a garbage truck parked on the roadside from a distance. Two men in garbage collection uniforms moved a big black bag down, sprinkling gasoline on it and burning it on the spot when no one was there at night. He looked at the flame covering the whole bag and looked at the ashes and finally closed his eyes slowly. Finally, he said, "Drive." The black caravan left the road, and the garbage truck also drove away quietly. Then the wind blew away the ashes. Maybe there would be no trace left tomorrow. Voices. Later, a canal was built to connect the Moscow River and the Volga River, so that it can lead to 5 different sea areas, so the river transportation has become more developed. 5. Yes, master. They are the Black Sea, the White Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Baltic Sea, and the Azov Sea. Ah, he seemed to sigh with emotion and said gently with a smile, "It seems that I don't need the search engine any more." She heard voices, a man's voice and a woman's voice, as if they were chatting. So she opened her eyes, but there was only darkness and stuffy in front of her. She seemed to be trapped in a narrow space. She struggled for a few times and finally found the exit to leave this narrow place a zipper. She pulled open the zipper, broke free from the big black bag, and breathed the fresh air. By the river, the evening lights of Moscow were flickering, dotting the river like a river of stars. A man and a woman were pointing to the river bank, whispering something. She remembered that she seemed to have seen the figures of these two people. When she was suffocating, she seemed to have heard the man's voice. "Customer, do you need anything?" Chapter 290. Anna slowly walked to the man and woman on the riverbank. Only when she got close enough did she see the appearance of the man and woman clearly. A very young man and woman. When they turned around and looked at Anna, she said subconsciously, "Did you save me?" But when she finished the sentence, she immediately paused with a surprised look on her face. Anna found that her voice was like the sound of wind through the broken glass. Hoarse, broken, and some of the syllables were even directly distorted into unknown sounds. She subconsciously reached out her hand to touch her throat. I. Anna tried hard to make herself complete, but it didn't seem to work. Finally, she heard the answer that made her feel unimaginable. I think, Miss Anna, you'd better not try. The young man with an oriental face in front of her slowly said, although we came immediately after hearing your call. It's a pity that you were in a bad state at that time. Luaccio tried to explain in words that Anna could understand. Let's put it this way. At that time, Miss Anna's throat had been broken and she was dying. Well, we kept you in this state for the time being. Anna opened her mouth as if she still couldn't understand the meaning of this paragraph. Luaccio had to make it simpler. That is to say, when you get rid of this state, you will immediately welcome death. Anna didn't know what the so-called state was, but she clearly touched the state of her neck. The bones here had been broken. If others were to look at this place, they would think that this place was very strange. She was silent for a long time and finally squeezed out the words with difficulty. How long? Luaccio said indifferently, of course not too long. The guest is in the protection mechanism of the transaction, so she can maintain this state. But if the time is too long, it will disappear automatically. Please don't misunderstand. We're not giving you any consideration, but we need to consume a little bit to maintain your state. I think since Miss Anna has woken up, then half an hour, is it enough for you to consider? By the way, Miss Anna will be completely dead after half an hour, so our judgment is, I'm afraid that you can't take out any more valuable transaction fee except your own soul. Anna fell silent after hearing this. She took a few steps forward, walked past Luaccio and Yi, and came to the position closest to the river. She gazed at the night view across the riverbank, lost in thought. When there were only 5 minutes left, she slowly turned around and silently looked at the young man. She still didn't speak, but having experienced such a miraculous scene, she subconsciously felt that this person might be able to understand her meaning. The club's boss still followed his duty to guide the guests. Luaccio said slowly, Is this really okay? Miss Anna, what I can tell you is that what you want to ask is not something that we Anitya Hellguards can provide you. It will subtract some of the value of the transaction fee you hold. That is, it will cause a deviation in your final purchasing power. Are you sure you still feel like you need this part? Anna nodded in silence. I got it. Boss Luo said straightforwardly, Mr. Yuri was saved by us. Now he can use the power of the Typica family, which is indeed from us. A trace of sadness flashed in Anna's eyes. She seemed to be able to guess the final answer, but she still had a longing look. She still chose to listen to it. The content of the transaction between Mr. Yuri and us is, Luaccio said softly, he hopes to gain the power of revenge. For this, he only has 1 month left to live. Now, there are about 27 days left. Anna finally closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Her instinct, even though she clearly felt that the air was blocked at her neck after entering her respiratory tract. This seemed to make her more uncomfortable. However, her tear ducts were still working well. Finally, she opened her eyes again. Her gaze was completely dim under the shroud of water vapor. In the end, she forced herself to reveal a smile that was even uglier than crying. With her hoarse, broken, and terrifying voice that sounded like that of the oldest witch, she said with a strong sense of hatred, You shouldn't fear. Luaccio said indifferently, This part of the cost has been recorded. Miss Anna, do you want to buy anything else? When the last 5 minutes were exhausted, Anna said with difficulty, Let me see to the end. As you wish. Luaccio smiled, My guest. It was past midnight. This was probably the most difficult night for Efim to fall asleep in recent years. Dressed in his pajamas, he sat alone in the cold living room, fiddling with the knife in his hand. This knife was like his mascot. It had accompanied him in his rise to power, and it could even be said to have played an extremely crucial role. He was 14 years old and killed for the first time. He still felt uneasy, as if it was the first time he stabbed someone with a knife when he was 14 years old. Of course, he preferred it to be because of this, rather than because of the current situation. This made him feel that things were not under his control. It was a denial of his ability. FM picked up the landline next to him. After waiting for a moment, he heard a slightly tired voice. "Old man, you seem to have contacted me the day before yesterday. So diligent, what's the matter?" FM said slowly. "There's a man called Victor. Is he one of your men?" "Victor?" The voice at the other end of the phone sounded surprised, asking, "He is indeed. Why, did he offend you?" FM said indifferently, "Nothing, but my men told me that a man called Victor caused a lot of trouble and affected a lot of business these days." "Really?" The person at the other end of the phone sighed. "I'm afraid it's because of what happened recently. Old man, this guy is qualified to be a workaholic. Believe me, he's not against you. He just wants to find some clues, like crazy. You know, the stolen painting has a great impact. I'm also under a lot of pressure. But don't worry, when this is over, I'll think of a way to deal with Victor. This guy is a thorn in the side. He's practically an arrogant guy." FM suddenly said, "Oh, from what you said, it seems that you, the boss of the police station, can't deal with a small inspector." "I can't help it. Victor is a very senior guy and has won a national medal. He's not a guy that can be casually cut off. Besides, I've been a little trouble recently. I don't want to make more trouble at this time. Old man, with your connections and information channels, haven't you heard any news about this painting? I think you should be able to help me." FM narrowed his eyes, smiling. "Old man, don't worry. I don't want to see your situation become worse. These 2 days, I'll let my men pay attention to this matter. If there's any news, I'll inform you at once." "Thanks a lot, old man. We're good partners after all." FM then hung up the phone. When he put down the phone, he nailed the knife in his hand to the table and sneered. It seems that this old man is no longer useful, so he picked up the phone again. His wife was still in the holiday house in the suburb. When he came back in the middle of the night, Victor talked with his wife on the phone. This was the most relaxed moment for Victor these days. He quietly lay on the bed in his downtown apartment, looking at the ceiling. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was a strange number, but obviously, the voice from the phone was familiar. "Mr. Victor, it's me." Chapter 291. The sun shone through the curtain and lit up the room. Vera's eyelids trembled slightly. Then she opened them. She breathed the air of a new day, although she still felt a little bad. She seemed to be in a good mood at the moment. When she sat up and stretched herself, she saw a small black card on the side of the pillow. It was like the size of the card she used to make the card magic. Vera frowned. She didn't remember ordering such a prop, but she didn't care too much about it. She had survived another full moon night. To her, this was something that could make her happy for a whole month. Then, when the next full moon came, she would be happy. So she picked up the black card with her fingers, subconsciously treating it as a poker card, and threw it out. The black card flew out and hit the wall, then slid down along the wall and became one of the many sundries in the room. Vera looked at the current state of the room, shaking her head with a wry smile. She didn't want to get into trouble, so she was afraid that before leaving this rented place, she would find someone to repair the damaged parts of the room. Vera got off the bed and walked out of the room with the quilt covering her body. The first thing she saw was Vicar. Vera shook her head, watching Vicar find a stool and sit 2 meters away from the door, facing her. He also held a fruit knife in his hand. As for now, he was dozing off. Vera walked over, lifting the stool with her foot. The vibration made Vicar wake up at once. The fruit knife in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. "Vera! You wake up. Are you all right?" Vicar quickly stood up. Vera whispered, "I think I will be better if I can have a delicious breakfast." "Oh, wait a minute. As long as you can eat, I will give you all the food in the fridge," Vicar said with an exaggerated expression. "As long as you don't eat me." Vera rolled her eyes. Then she started to count her fingers. When she counted the 3rd finger, she gave it to Vicar. "By the way, did you put me on the bed?" Vera turned on the TV and then asked Vicar, who was making breakfast. "How dare I?" Vicar shook his head. "You know how to climb to the bed this time." Vera shook her head. "I forgot, probably." Vera was absent-minded for a moment. She seemed to remember that the last place she fell was the floor, and vaguely did she hear any strange sound? After breakfast, Vera directly looked at Vicar. "Get your tools ready. Tonight, I will go to Ephem's fortress to have a look." "Today?" Vicar was stunned. "Are you sure? You need rest now." "I'm recovering very well. I should be able to fully recover by noon," Vera said indifferently. "Although I'm not complete, at least I'm better than an ordinary person. Let's take it as a relaxation. Boss, Mr. Vicar." His henchman sent him to the floor. The moment the elevator door opened, Ephem's appearance appeared in Victor's sight. "Ha ha ha. My dear Vicar, I've been waiting for you for a long time." His hearty laughter was like seeing an old friend he hadn't seen for many years. The sincere smile on Ephem's face even gave Vicar an illusion that this was his old friend for decades. "There are too many things in the police station. Forgive me. I can only come at this time of the night." Vicar also smiled. Ephem stepped forward and gave him a big hug, then put his hand on Vicar's shoulder and let him in, saying enthusiastically, "I just opened a bottle of good wine. I bought it from Sotheby's in Italy last year. You must taste it." "Really?" Vicar said with a smile. "Then I really need to taste it, or I'm afraid I won't have a chance in my life." "Ha ha ha." Ephem laughed. "No, you'll have a lot of chances in the future. As long as you like, you can not only taste these good wines, but also become one of the buyers." Vicar smiled without saying anything. Ephem said while opening the bottle, "I'm 54 years old this year. Since I was 13 years old, I've been making a living. Do you know why I came out to make a living in the first place?" "I'd like to hear the details." "A pair of leather shoes." Ephem recalled. The economy at that time was not like now. The whole country was engaged in the military. The military was developed, but other fields also collapsed. I was still in school in the winter, you know. I could only wear a pair of worn-out boots, and was the object of ridicule of the whole class. So from then on, I swore that as long as it's something I want, I'll try my best to get it. Vicar said indifferently, "Mr. Ephem now has a wealth that ordinary people can't imagine." Ephem laughed. "Come on, let's drink. Don't talk about those unpleasant things. After drinking, let's talk about something else." Vicar squinted. "Mr. Ephem, aren't you too happy today? Please don't forget that you're not in a good situation now." "No, the worse the situation, the bigger the profit behind it." Ephem patted Vicar's shoulder. "Come with me." He led Vicar to the central area of the living room. A painting of the nameless maiden was quietly placed on the table in the central area. It was lying flat. "As a Muscovite, I think you must know what this painting is, right?" Ephem said with a smile. Vicar glanced at it, nodded, and then sighed. "A painting of 260 million euros. This world is crazy." "But, Mr. Ephem, you let me see this painting. Is it just to show off to me?" "No, I'm going to give this painting to you," Ephem suddenly said. "And I can tell you that this is a real painting." Victor furrowed his brows. He didn't know what Ephem meant by a real painting, as if there was a fake one. The video he had and the one Yuri gave him didn't mention anything about the painting in detail. The video was only used to prove that the painting was bought by Ephem privately. The nameless maiden was a treasure passed down from generation to generation. It could be regarded as a national treasure. Ephem's behavior was trading a national treasure privately. Such a crime couldn't be easily exonerated. "What do you want me to do?" But at the same time, he keenly felt that Ephem had other plans. Ephem said at this time, "You found his video from your subordinates. How did you get it?" Vicar shook his head. "I can't act rashly and alert the enemy, of course, before I confirm Mr. Ephem's willingness to cooperate." Ephem rubbed his hands, nodding. "You did the right thing. You should be careful and cautious. But now you don't need to start with your subordinates." That's because I know how this video got leaked. Oh, next, it's time for you to prove to me that you have enough ability to be the boss of the police station. FM chuckled. This painting appeared in someone's house. Even if he didn't plead guilty, at least he couldn't escape the crime of secretly hiding a national treasure, right? Vicar asked calmly, "Who is the other party?" FM said slowly, "It was a guy who escaped in the past and called himself an aristocrat. As for now, it's not a business that can be exposed to the public. In the past 10 years, this family started to develop a new business by smuggling private armies. They were supposed to hide in Morocco, but for some reason, they came to Moscow recently. You know how developed the river transportation in this city is." Vicar seemed to have thought of FM's plan. It was as he had expected. Chapter 292. Victor didn't respond in a hurry, but pondered for a while. "But I'm afraid you can't recover your loss." He was referring to the deal that FM made with a sky-high price. FM sneered. "This is just the first step. After that, I'll have a plan." Victor said slowly, "It seems that Mr. FM's intention is not only to take revenge on the heir of the Typica family." FM put his arm around Victor's shoulder intimately, taking him to the front of the glass curtain wall in the building. Looking at the scenery outside, a sense of arrogance was emitted spontaneously. He smiled confidently with the tone of a successful man. "There's nothing that can't be done in this world. It's just that you haven't thought of it yet. Why are most of the capable people in the world mediocre all their lives? That's because they haven't thought of it, or dare not think of it, or dare not do it. For example, you." He looked at Victor. "You've been in the profession for so many years. Why are you still a small inspector? You obviously have enough ability, but obviously you can think of it and do it now. And with my support, your life will be wonderful in the future." Victor smiled gratefully. He reached out his hand, looking at FM. Then, "Please take care of me in the future, Mr. FM." "Ha! I like straightforward people." FM grabbed Victor's palm directly. He was happy that the two could reach this consensus. As for how much Victor could meet his expectations, it didn't matter how much he could meet. As long as there was a conflict, it would be better to change one. Just like the old buddy of the boss of the police station, who was racking his brains for the recent official affairs. However, his expression suddenly froze at this moment, froze at Victor's action, froze at the handcuffs on his wrists. At the moment of shaking hands, Victor suddenly took out a handcuff from his back and then gently smashed it on his wrist. It was fastened easily. What are you doing?" FM frowned. Victor said indifferently, "Mr. FM, I'm now officially resisting arrest, because you are suspected of privately purchasing a national treasure and illegally possessing it, as well as suspected of bribing police officers. And I even suspect that you are engaged in illegal activities. Oh, by the way, you've already shown me the evidence, right?" Her frozen smile finally thawed. FM widened his eyes, but he calmed down instantly, saying indifferently, "I didn't expect that I would be cheated by such a little trick. But do you really think you can kill me like this?" "That's not for me to consider," Victor said expressionlessly. "That's for the court to decide. What I need to do is to arrest the criminal when there is evidence." "Prisoner," FM said disdainfully. He shook his head and joked. "But don't forget whose place you are standing now. It's hard to say whether you can get out of here." Victor handcuffed one end of the handcuff on his own hand, shrugging. "I don't think your men dare to do anything to me." He took out the phone. "It's me. I'll bring a team here right away. The address is—" "Well, just say that I found the hiding place of the nameless maiden and caught a criminal." Victor looked at the time on his watch again. "About 10 minutes. Mr. FM, should we finish the bottle of famous wine you bought last year to celebrate your arrest?" However, FM uttered a low growl, pulling his arm hard. His body was huge, and his strength was unbelievably huge. With this tug, Victor's entire body was unable to stand steadily. Victor was shocked. He didn't think that this fat guy had such strength, At this moment, his body had been tightly held by Efem's hands. "You're just a small inspector. I don't mind you blackmailing me. Instead, I give you a chance to cooperate with me. You actually don't know what's good for you." Victor felt that his arms were almost broken under Efem's tight grip. This guy's body was not made of soft fat, but rather strong muscles. "I'll add one more crime, that is, assaulting a police officer." Victor struggled wildly, but still couldn't break free. The crazy squeeze made it difficult for him to breathe. Bang! At this moment, the glass curtain wall suddenly burst open, and a figure swayed into the room from the night sky. Broken glass scattered across the floor like bricks and stones. Efem, who was strangling Victor with his arms, looked ferocious at this moment, but what he saw was a woman wearing a black leather coat and a clown mask. The voice that came from the voice changer sounded softly at this time. "Oh, go on, don't worry about me. I'm here to get something." With this, the woman wearing a clown mask quickly walked to the painting placed on the table and picked it up with one hand. "How dare you!" Efem glared angrily. He could only choose to let go of Victor and rushed towards the woman. However, even though he possessed enormous strength, his similarly enormous body made him appear extremely clumsy. "It seems that this is the most unskilled thing I've done." She shook her head. "This can only be regarded as robbing." She shook her head uninterestedly, taking out a finger-thick metal pipe from a backpack hanging on her waist, and threw it on the ground. The two ends of the metal pipe bounced off instantly, and then rapidly released a large amount of white mist. "Ah!" Efem still roared, but he could only choose to rush out of the range of the mist. But he could only watch the mysterious woman jump out of the broken window with the painting, and he couldn't stop her. He hurriedly ran to the window and watched as the woman slid down the rope and finally landed on the ground. He watched as the woman waved at him after she landed. He angrily grabbed the rope and pulled the cart a few times. Ah! 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 It seemed that he could only vent the anger in his heart by roaring like this. "Boss!" Finally, his subordinate rushed in, reaching out to push away the thick smoke, and came to him. His subordinate looked at Victor, who fell to the ground. He seemed to be in a coma, but his and Efem's arms were still handcuffed together. His subordinate could only ask anxiously, What happened?" "F and C." Efem clenched his fist, fiercely hitting a piece of glass next to him. "The real F and C is here! That damned clown, he stole my painting." "Boss, this..." His subordinate frowned. "Isn't this the fake painting you used to frame the Typica family? It's okay to steal it as long as you're okay." "Idiot." Efem gritted his teeth. "Do you think a fake painting can kill them? Wouldn't they insist that it's just a fake and that it's just for show? Is there a law that forbids private possession of the fake, the nameless maiden? If I don't take out the real one, how can I nail him to death directly? Anyway, this painting will eventually return to the gallery, but I have plenty of ways to get it out." "This..." His subordinate suddenly broke out in cold sweat. "Find this clown for me," Efem said with hatred. "Find this woman, even if you have to turn the city upside down. I want her to suffer a fate worse than death. You guys go and chase that clown." His subordinate hurriedly ordered loudly. A group of people hurriedly took the elevator and left. "Boss, how to deal with this Victor?" Efem frowned, glancing at the unconscious Victor, coldly snorting, "Deal with him? And prepare the car, I'm going to the airport." "Now," Efem nodded. "I'm not sure if Victor has any other means, but that video must be released by the Typica family. They haven't taken any action these 2 days. I don't know what they are planning. Too many people saw me at the auction that day, so I have to hide outside temporarily so that I have more room to return. In case something happens, I'm abroad, so they can't do anything to me." His subordinate looked embarrassed. "But boss, I'm afraid you can't leave tonight." "Why?" "Efem gave a start. Didn't I ask you to book the tickets for all the time this week?" "Sorry, boss, I didn't book it." The subordinate said slowly. Efim narrowed his eyes. He had a bad premonition, which made his heartbeat speed up. At this time his subordinate's phone suddenly rang. Well, I know. Invite them up. Well, it's the boss's order. Who did you let up? Efim said gloomily. The subordinate said indifferently, Police. He glanced at Victor, who was lying on the ground. I think it should be Inspector Victor, who called them here. You betrayed me. The subordinate waved his hand, raising his eyebrows. Sorry, boss. I just hope my salary can be more. In addition, I actually hate to keep guarding this elevator door, doing the same job as an airport security inspector. After landing, she didn't run too far away. Wearing a clown mask, she quickly ran out of the range of this building. In an alley, she looked at the famous painting that finally fell into the hands of the owner of the F&C painting. But she didn't look at it carefully, but directly tore off the frame, took out the drawing paper, then rolled it up and stuffed it into a flower tube. At this time, she tilted her head, listening to the voice. Vera, Efim's people will find you soon. Oh, you're really capable and efficient. Vera took off her mask, smiling. She walked into the depths of this alley, while smiling. You're going to collect things. I'm going to tease these guys. She had come to the depths of this alley, then through the painting tube to one side of the dustbin here. And on the other side, there was a huge object covered with black cloth. Vera whistled, lifting the black cloth with one hand, then turned over and sat on this huge object. Boom! A roar suddenly sounded. Rushed out of this alley. Black. Dodge Tomahawk. The black Dodge Tomahawk galloped on the road at a high speed. The 8.3-liter engine was enough to let it release a sound like a dragon's roar when running. Vera enjoyed the feeling of flying at such a high speed, which made her heart beat slightly, excitedly. For her, it was more like a real life. She turned around to take a look. There were a few black cars chasing after her. But for her, it was impossible to catch up with this Dodge Tomahawk on such a crowded road in Moscow. When one of the cars was about to catch up, Vera suddenly swayed her body, letting the Dodge Tomahawk pass through the two cars in front of her calmly. In the blink of an eye, she had already left the car that was about to catch up with her. However, at the fork in the road ahead, there were two cars driving in the opposite direction, almost blocking her path on this small section of the road. Vera didn't panic. She gripped the brake hard, swinging the Dodge Tomahawk, and her body almost stuck to the road as she slid sideways. In the end, she put her legs on the ground, straightened the motorcycle, and completed a U-turn. Then she accelerated again. Boom! The Dodge Tomahawk, which exceeded the acceleration of most sports cars, was like a flying dragon in an instant. It was crashing into the car behind. Don't be afraid. She doesn't dare to hit us. She's bluffing. No, But the driver, looking at the Dodge Tomahawk that was about to hit him, instinctively twisted his steering wheel. The car instantly deviated from the original lane and hit another car of his companion. On the road, the sound of the emergency brake and the car collision sounded at the same time. Bang! Bang! Bang, bang, bang! The cars that collided in a series of cars crashed into a tragic scene on the road in an instant. Vera didn't stop the Dodge Tomahawk, but directly stood up in the car. She took off the helmet, threw it out of the road, and opened her hands like this. The Dodge Tomahawk, which was speeding forward, came with a huge wind pressure. The airflow behind Vera seemed to have turned into a pair of invisible wind wings, making her body infinitely light, as if she could fly at any time. She let out her cheers heartily. She knew she was alive. Boss Luo walked to the depths of the alley, looking at the painting tube next to the dustbin. He smiled and picked it up without any pressure. He opened it, took out the drawing paper, and then opened it. Anna sneered at this time, saying indifferently, F&C probably didn't expect that the thing they tried so hard to get would fall into the hands of someone who didn't do anything. Luaccio said casually, I just passed by and picked up this thing. Theoretically, the thing placed here should be ownerless, right? Anna sneered. So you feel at ease, right? She thought it was a right choice to waste a little bit of soul value to restore her ability to speak. At least, she could still mock the other party when she had no choice. This was better than doing nothing, at least a little bit. A little bit of comfort could be considered. Luaccio rolled up the drawing paper again, putting it back into the painting tube, and then threw it on the ground. Miss Anna, don't you want to see the end? Let's go and see what you want to see. Anna was stunned. You don't want this the nameless maiden? Luaccio said indifferently, this is also fake.